Hi, my name is Lily Fretwell and I'm 13 years old from Perth, Western Australia. And I have trichoherpatoenteric syndrome. And I am the same as other kids. I do like to go out, I do like to play, and I do like to do what kids like to do, except have a syndrome and I'm small, and that just makes me slightly different. I'm now going to tell you a little bit about my life before diagnosis. I didn't get diagnosed until I was 7 years old, and I was the first person to get diagnosed by Gareth Bainham and his team as part of the Undiagnosed Disease program. Even before I was born, I was already small in my mum's tummy, and my mum had tests to see why. When I was born, I got sick quickly and the doctors didn't know what was happening. I was in hospital for 4 weeks before I came home, and I went through a lot in that time. I had lots of tests and procedures to find out what was causing me to be unwell and so small. I got sick a lot and would end up in hospital for quite some time. It was frustrating for my parents because no one could tell them what was happening with me. I didn't like all the blood tests and procedures, and I didn't know why this had to happen to me. I would now like to share how my life and the life of my family changed after I got my diagnosis. When my parents told me I had trichoherpatoenteric syndrome, my first reaction was, that's why I'm so small. But as I got older, I understood more of what it meant. This syndrome affects my hair, liver, and intestines. For my parents, a diagnosis meant that they didn't need to keep looking for answers. They were able to find other families around the world who also have kids with my syndrome. They could research my syndrome to find out more about it to work out how to support me. It also meant that all of the testing to find out what was going on with me could stop, and we could focus on how to manage the symptoms of my syndrome. It was good for me to finally know why I was the way I am. To finish off, I would like to read you something that I wrote at school about the community I belong to. The community I belong to is the rare and undiagnosed disease community. I felt accepted in this community when I did a video for a rare and undiagnosed disease community, and it was on telephone, on TV, and people saw it. And when I went to Parliament House for a rare and undiagnosed diseases and had a photo of Mark McGowan and saw people who took care of me when I was a baby and knew me. I am important to this community by being on TV lots, on the newspaper, on Safari, done videos, but I got to become more of a member. When I grow up, I could work with the rare undiagnosed disease people and be a part of the job and work there. And I continue to support the rare and undiagnosed disease community by sharing my story. My hope is that all the undiagnosed people around the world can one day get a diagnosis like I did, so that they can finally have answers and get the support they need.
Thank you, Lily. I think you already are an amazing, fantastic, wonderful person to raise awareness about the undiagnosed and the rare diseases. And thank you to your mom and dad too. And we wish you the best and looking forward to work with you in the future too. We welcome all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. We are all from all over the world, and I hope you will join this event to celebrate all the undiagnosed person who living in the world. And it's about 150 million undiagnosed in the world, and there is the family too. And this event will raise awareness about how it is and what you can do. And our vision is that you can see that together we can change the world. Alone, it's difficult, but together you can make it.
And we encourage everybody to use the chat to put questions that we might answer as soon as we can, and we will for sure make them available on the website later. And I think we should leave for Domenica.
Yes.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's my pleasure. My name is Domenica Taruscio. I'm the director of the National Center for Rare Diseases, and I'm working in UDNI since 2014. Actually, I would like really to thank Hélène Mick for starting this wonderful international network together with Bill Gall and ourselves. It's a real pleasure because after Hélène and Mick welcome, I don't have to add so much. This is the first Global Undiagnosed Day, and I'm so excited. I'm so happy and to celebrate together with all of you. So I think that we are a community, as we said, and we are willing to work with all undiagnosed persons and people who take care of them at national level, international, global level, with the institutions as well as with the families and patients. So I thank you very much, and I give the floor to Hélène. Thanks to all participants, all speakers, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Rick Gudotti. Nice to meet you. I'm the founder. Nice to see all of my friends here as well. I'm also the founder and director of this organization, Positive Exposure. Positive Exposure is a nonprofit organization that promotes a more inclusive world through photography, through film, through educational programming, through exhibitions, lectures, and workshops. I started 25 years ago, Positive Exposure, starting working with the advocacy organization supporting people living with albinism, NOAA is the National Organization for Albinism. That initial collaboration created a cover story in Life magazine entitled Redefining Beauty. Once we started working with people with albinism, I realized that the importance of advocacy organizations for all the rare genetic conditions that were out there. Collaborating very closely with the Genetic Alliance, we were then introduced to many other genetic support advocacy groups that we wanted to collaborate with to, again, show those, to redefine beauty and show the beauty in diversity. So we started working very early days with the Genetic Alliance and doing an outreach, working with many genetic conditions. This was the first group that we worked with after albinism for the chromosome 18 anomalies. When I researched the chromosome 18 anomalies, these were the images that we saw, the images that we're currently presenting in medical textbooks. Images of very scary, images of a lot of stillborns and people living with cleft palates and trachs and feeding tubes. And I went to my first conference terrified, not knowing what to expect, because these were the only images that I had as a representative of a chromosome 18 anomaly. But these were the kids that I met when I was there. Stunning, beautiful family. They were kids with cleft palates and trachs and feeding tubes, but they were kids. And then what was missing in those photographs was the humanity that was so apparent and so absent in those images. I very quickly started collaborating in collaboration with the Genetic Alliance, many of the genetic advocacy organizations for rare disease. This, of course, is Billy representing the National Marfan Foundation, or the Marfan syndrome, again, a connective tissue disorder. Caleb living with achondroplasia dwarfism, a very common form of dwarfism, represented by the Little People of America Foundation, working with that advocacy organization. Lucas and his dad living with Fragile X syndrome, the leading familial genetic marker for autism, but again, working with the Fragile X Foundation. Here, Ronan, of course, with Prader-Willi syndrome, working again with the advocacy organization, so important to us, and how important advocacy organizations are to families and individuals living with a variety of genetic conditions. Jada living with 22q11.2 deletion, working with a hospital here in the States at Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania. Jada, by the way, has the best giggle on the planet. And Simone living with Down syndrome, representing the National Down Syndrome Foundation of Italy. So currently, I was so aware of how important advocacy organizations are, how important they're providing the support for the families, creating a network of families and friends and specialists and the gathering so people realize that they're not alone. And it wasn't until I had the great fortune to meet Helene and Mick at the Wilhelm Foundation that we realized that that advocacy organizations and that collection of families were completely related to a diagnosis. It was when you're undiagnosed, though, you're completely alone. So with their direction and with their great support, we then traveled around the globe working with various families and centers of excellence for people living that are undiagnosed on this very important Undiagnosed Day. We traveled, and so we created this initiative, a photographic initiative, just creating opportunities to really see the beauty and really understand that we needed to have a voice and we needed to have visibility of our undiagnosed families and individuals. We created an exhibition for the Mayo Clinic at their last undiagnosed initiative and a gallery, traveling to various countries. We were in Australia, we were in India with Ratna, Hai Ratna, in Mali, and the Netherlands, and of course in Sweden, in collaboration with the Karolinska Institute, the Mayo Clinic, and Johns Hopkins, and NIH. As we traveled around the globe, we were, just so many beautiful, incredible, gorgeous stories, so many incredible opportunities to meet these families, to meet these individuals that were kind of just out there in this gray area of the undiagnosed. We knew that there was really important that we brought in, we had visibility and we had an opportunity to tell those stories. Here's Aliyu in a village outside of Bamako in Mali. And Ali's just so gorgeous. You can see how stunning he is and that smile and that power and how important he is. And it's just incredible for us to be able to capture those stories and relay those opportunities. But it was working with this gorgeous Aliyu that I realized no matter where we are in the world, no matter which continent we're on, which culture we're working, which language we're speaking, all of us, and this is all of us, not just the undiagnosed, but this is all of us, we share the same need. And that's a need to be seen, a need to be heard, and a need to belong. And our Undiagnosed initiative will continue to grow. Of course, we had to take a pause for a while there because of the pandemic, but we're getting ready to gear up and start collaborating again with communities, again, celebrating the beauty and richness of our undiagnosed populations. Thank you so much.
Very much, Rick. Hélène, are you online? Otherwise, we will proceed with the presentation. So it's my pleasure to to introduce Anders Olausen. And Anders is well known in our world and is from Agreska. And he will speak about UN resolution Undiagnosed. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Domenica, and thank you all for, I assume you hear me and clearly and see me. And thanks you very much for the invitation. And I'm so happy to be here today and join you on this very important day. Unfortunately, we can't meet live, but video is the next good thing. I would try to give some remarks based upon the UN Agenda 2030 and also resolution for rare diseases, and focus on how these two can be useful for the movement of undiagnosed children. As you might know, we celebrate a fantastic day, an event in December 16 last year at 3:15 p.m. New York time. The resolution A/C.3/76/L.20, or better known as a resolution addressing the challenges of persons living with the rare diseases and their families, was anonymously adopted by all 193 member states at the United Nations in New York. Can you imagine that? All 193. So why in New York and not at the UN in Geneva or for the WHO? I short would like to say that rare diseases is a global concern. That's why, number one, which was very clear on the Global Rare Disease Day in February 28 at the Expo 2020 in Dubai. Duran will come later and she knows all about that and maybe add something to it. but it was a fantastic day, showing truly that the rare disease is a global concern. We choose to adopt a resolution at the United Nations in New York because having a rare disease affects all aspects of your life, not only your medical health, but all what we call them the big five: healthcare, social care, school education, insurance, and labor and adult life. Another reason is that several countries suggested that the resolution should be adopted at the United Nations in Geneva. And that is where WHO is. This because they focused only on health support and the health aspect, which we of course know is not enough. And perspective so relevant also for undiagnosed person's life. Fortunately, these countries changed their view and all voted yes to the United Nations General Assembly in New York. This is important in how to make use of the resolution and the Agenda 2030 for undiagnosed movement, which I understood was a question to me today. The basic is the Agenda 2030 and all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and not only number 3, which is health, and of course the UN resolution for rare diseases. This because all member states at the United Nations has signed up to protect and live by these documents. Yes, you hear me right. They have signed up to live and protect these documents, all 193 member state leaders. This is why it's so fantastic. When reading the resolution, there is some part that is of special interest for the undiagnosed community, as I see it. And please let me go through a couple of them. And the resolution is, you might know, based upon different paragraphs, but I will give you some of the paragraphs to show the tools that is of importance and can make use for the undiagnosed movement. Number 1, it says, recalling the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Convention of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, and the Constitution for the World Health Organization. It's fantastic. They tell them those are important. They also say, reaffirming also that health is a precondition for and an outcome and indicator of the social, economic, and the environmental dimension of sustainable development and the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. And acknowledging the reciprocal benefits between the attainment of Sustainable Development Goal 3, which number is health, and the achievement of all the other goals. We continue with expressing appreciation for the efforts made by member states, the United Nations system, and relevant stakeholders, including the NGO Committee for Rare Diseases, to prevent and address the situation of persons living with a rare disease and their family. And now listen, but mindful of the need for further action. That is, in my mind, the undiagnosed people's need. Calls upon member states to strengthen health system, notably in terms of primary health care, in order to provide universal access to a wide range of healthcare services that are safe, quality, accessible, available, and affordable, timely, clinically, and financially integrated. Also encourage member states to address the root causes of discrimination against persons living with a rare disease, including through awareness raising the dimension of accurate information on rare diseases and other measures as appropriate. And that is undiagnosed for me. Finally, urges member states, United Nations agencies, and other stakeholders in cooperation with persons living with rare diseases and their families, including through the representative organization, including through developing, reviewing, and strengthening inclusive policies to address the structural and underlying causes of stigma and discrimination faced by them. That is done for undiagnosed needs. So In conclusion, I would like to say, I'm a strong believer in timing, and divine timing, or synchronicity, as some people call it. The timing is now very good for the undiagnosed movement to work and make use of these comments I made from the resolution. We didn't have that resolution previously. We have it now. Both Agenda 2030 and the resolution offers concrete tools to approach all member states at United Nations in this. We at the NGO Committee for Rare Diseases are happy to be of any assistance in your work. And thank you for your attention, and Godspeed for the movement and the work you do. Fantastic work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this important presentation. As you said, really, we enjoyed very much. And you know very well that we invited you also in several meetings, even in Italy, for a webinar to present the UN resolution. So this is very, very important for all of us, for the community of rare and undiagnosed diseases. So thank you very much, Anders Olausen, for your commitment and this great presentation. Thank you. So I invite Hélène. Hélène? Maybe there is some problem with the connection. Yeah, Hélène, please, can you speak now? Yeah.
Yes, please. I'm sorry. Thank you, Domenica, and thank you, Rick, and thank you, Anders. You are so important, all of you. And together we can change this. Thank you. And I will leave it to Lisa now, Lisa Cimenti from Mayo Clinic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Our next session is called UDNI, and we have 3 speakers for this session. The first one is William Gall. He's the director of the Undiagnosed Disease program at the National Institutes of Health in the United States. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, I'm starting my slides. Can you see my slides? Okay.
Yes.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure to be here on this Undiagnosed Day. And I appreciate the invitation from Helene and Mick. And I want to tell you how the Undiagnosed Disease Network International arose. And I have to advance my slides. Oh, here we go. Well, in 2008, the Undiagnosed Diseases program and at the National Institutes of Health was established with the goals to try to bring patients to a diagnosis when they had sought one for a long time, but also to discover new diseases and the basic mechanisms that cause those diseases, whether it was cell biology or a biochemical pathway. And over the years, we're able to see over 1,500 individuals here at the NIH for a 1-week stay as inpatients. We reviewed over 4,500 applications, a lot of children, and more than half of the cases were neurological cases. We published so that the NIH liked us to a certain extent and made a bunch of diagnoses, including the discovery of several new diseases. And then the Undiagnosed Diseases Network arose in 2014, which was really an expansion to the entire country of the United States, and eventually had 12 clinical sites that saw undiagnosed patients. It also had a coordinating center, sequencing cores, and some research cores. And the first patients were seen in 2015. And that program had well over 5,000 applicants and over 2,000 accepted and about 2,000 evaluated, made well over 500 diagnoses, and did a lot of exome and genome sequencing.
So we know
in the future, then, the undiagnosed program here in the intramural program of the National Institutes of Health will continue with intramural funding. The Undiagnosed Diseases Network for the country will have its funding stopped from the common fund of the National Institutes of Health in 2022, but there's a consortium that's going to form, as an offshoot of that. And there will continue to be some NIH support for the coordinating centers and for centers of excellence. There will also be an Undiagnosed Diseases Network Foundation that can help to provide some support, and other support will be provided by university funds and philanthropy. So people are grouping together to help to continue this effort. Well, also in 2014, the Undiagnosed Disease Network International arose, largely as an initiative of Helene and Mick, who were able to mount a great deal of interest on the part of the world in having undiagnosed disease programs throughout the world. And since then, there have been 10 different UDNI meetings supported in part by the Wilhelm Foundation, also in part by the NIH and by local sponsors. I list them here. The UDNI also has its own charter, its own committees, data sharing policy, and best practices. And one of the real goals of the UDNI is to share information and best practices and abilities throughout the world. In fact, there are undiagnosed disease programs now in these countries, and there's government support for virtually all of these, because a lot of the healthcare systems of the world are run by the governments. So in the past few months, actually maybe a year or so, there have been new initiatives of the Undiagnosed Disease Network International that have to do with working groups. One of the working groups is a diagnostics working group. And you can see some of the pictures of some of the patients around the world who do not have a diagnosis. And the UDNI clinicians and scientists plan to make recommendations about cases that are submitted by physicians around the world, and to connect those physicians and the patients with undiagnosed disease program experts. I think Anders has just told you about the United Nations resolution, which is really a spectacular initiative to promote the diagnosis of patients who don't have a diagnosis. There's also a developing nations working group to try to bring undiagnosed disease programs to developing nations throughout the world. And look at the map of the world and how many different nations are now having undiagnosed disease programs being developed. We're establishing areas in which local leaders will be champions that are supported by the other members of the Undiagnosed Disease Network, and also by organizations that can provide free sequencing and things of that nature. Our whole goal here is to provide a hand to those individuals who have really an unmet need, the need to have a diagnosis, and by that diagnosis, to become members of a particular community. I thank you, and I thank you all for your efforts in this united work and a goal to bring diagnoses to patients who don't have one all around the world. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Domenica Taruschio, and Dr. Taruschio is the director of the National Center for Rare Disease at the Italian National Institute of Health. Thank you
very
Domenica.
much. Thank you very much, Elisa, and thank you very much to Helene for inviting me. I try to share my slides and see if we can do it. Yeah, condividi, no. So let's see. Okay. Do you see my slides? No. No, not yet. So I ask let me see if I condividi io lo schermo. I ask the technician help, as he said, there is some problem with Zoom. Sorry, could you please project my presentation from yeah. I can see, yeah. Okay. So, okay. So thank you very much. As you see, from Dr. Gall presentation, UDNI is organized in several working groups. So in few minutes, I have the the privilege to present, to introduce you the UDNI working groups. As I said, we are very active. Next, please. Very active. And we are, next slide, please. Yeah, this is the web page of the website, the front page. And everything I'm saying now, it's in the website. So please go there and search for more information that I can say in 5 minutes. So it's there is there the list of the working group, the description of the aims and so on, and the composition also. Next, please. Yeah, as you can see, we have several working groups and committees, and I will go in this 5 minutes, 4 minutes, by one, present working group and committee. Next, please. The first is the program committee working group. And as you can see here, this is the committee from last conference that we organized in Italy, in Turin, in Roma. So there are several names here. The committee working group has the duty to organize the scientific program of the UDNI conference, which is annual, sometimes twice per year. And here you can see there are several members coming from 4 membership categories that we have inside UDNI. There is the first name usually is the host institution. So this year in January and the first day of February was Roccatello, Professor Roccatello. Then there is the funder, currently the Common Fund, and the William Foundation. So the second working group is the communication working group. And as you can see here, the names, I cannot read all of them because otherwise I need a lot of time. I just would like to underline the aims and the purposes of this working group. So the working group is responsible for coordinating UDNI information, elaborating and disseminating the UDNI newsletter, and also, very importantly, managing and updating the website, UDNI website, including also a dedicated forum. This is a new activity for accelerating the sharing of information among UDNI members. It's my pleasure to say also that the UDNI website is managed by the National Center for Rare Diseases in Italy at the Istituto Superiore di Sanità. Next, please. Next. Yeah. Data sharing working group, which is chaired by David Adams from USA, is chair, but as you can see, there are several members. And the aim is to elaborate recommendations regarding UDNI sharing that involves rules of submission, storage, and access. So I think that this is an important working group, and of course we are working very hard in order really to reach the main aim. The patient engagement working group, which is chaired by Helen Sederoth, but also from Gulsin Gumus and Drell, so you can see big organizations. They have the aims to provide a patient perspective to issues like data sharing and to offer clarity and transparency. So they are working very hard, and this requires, of course, mutual trust that we do have, of course, in UDNI, and it involves the presence of patient representatives in the governing board. Next, please. Genetic Counseling Working Group, which is chaired, as you can see, there are not so many members, but a very active working group. And the purpose is to address the genetic counseling needs to patients, families, and their families who participate to the UDP programs. So they are very active, again, and working with the patients, with the families, as I said. Finally, there is an educational working group, which is chaired by Bela Meleg from Hungary and co-chaired also from Professor Bruce Core from USA. and there are several members. Our purpose is to address the educational needs of the scientific community involved in this field. And we are working to structure together with Professor Olaf Bodamer, also training for students and so on. So it's a very important working group. Next, please. Finally, we have a huge working group, which is co-chaired by myself, by Manuel Posada from Spain, Samuel from Ghana, Samuel White from Ghana, and also Olaf Bodamer, USA. And many, many members, we are so happy. This is a very interesting working group. In brief, what we would like to do is to address difficulties and opportunities for providing diagnosis to undiagnosed patients in the developing countries. And we are doing our best. We performed already a survey, a questionnaire. We completed a questionnaire, the first one, to identify the main needs, unmet needs. And we are progressing now with a second survey in order to really to act after that. The diagnostic working group, which is already has been mentioned, and it will be addressed after this presentation. It's co-chaired also, you see, from Lorenzo Botta, USA, from Professor Anna Northern Sweden, and also Emma Palmer in Australia, and many, many members are participating. And the aim is, as you can understand, is to ameliorate the diagnosis of patients and, of course, give a name to undiagnosed diseases. And in general, this is the final goal for all of us. Next, please. So I finished my presentation. I would like really to thank you. This UDNI, Undiagnosed International Network, it's very, very important for us, for all of us, because we are really working very collaboratively, in a collaborative way. We are sharing everything, and there is really a good feeling. So we are happy to work a lot for the benefit of patients, especially, of course, for undiagnosed patients. So up to now in this network, we have 41 countries participating, which is really a pleasure because we have to update very often with Marco Salvatore, who is a researcher in our team, very active, and with Gianluca Ferrari, who is IT person that I thank very much, of course, the IT person working on the website with Mick Sederot together. So we have to update this map almost every day. Yesterday we had 40 countries.
Hello, my name's Dr. Emma Palmer. I'm a clinical geneticist in Sydney, Australia. And on behalf of the Undiagnosed Disease Network International Diagnostic Working Group, I wanted to share with you what we're building as a global collaboration. So we know the statistics that over 300 million people globally have a rare disease, but over half of those do not yet have a diagnosis for their rare disease and often have a long pathway of misdiagnoses and frustrations trying to get a diagnosis to get better treatment and support. And wonderfully, a whole range of undiagnosed disease programs have been established around the world, where a network of specialists within an institution can look at all of the clinical features and investigations that a person has had and put their minds together to try and get an answer for that family. Sometimes that's looking at new diagnostic tests that need to be done and connecting with research both locally within the country and internationally. We have set up the Undiagnosed Disease Network International Diagnostic Working Group to really try and help fast-track diagnoses for more families around the world, and in particular support newly established undiagnosed disease programs by sharing knowledge from more established ones internationally and also skills. And we believe that that will help grow our global knowledge of how to get to a diagnosis as quickly as possible for all families to achieve equity. Our team is led by Anne Nordgren from Sweden and Lorenzo Botto from Utah, and supported by Fulya. And we really therefore cover many time zones around the world, working on this program on a volunteer basis. And what's been amazing is we reached out to the Undiagnosed Disease Network International, and a huge number, over 100 clinicians and doctors and specialists from around the world have put their hands up and said that they would be happy to be part of this new initiative. And these are the ranges of the specialists that are represented and growing numbers of countries. So the idea is first, an undiagnosed family will be directed to their local undiagnosed disease program in their local hospital or in their local centre. And the program will go through its standard procedures in trying to get an answer for that family. And then if there are families that remain undiagnosed and they're interested in participating in the Undiagnosed Disease program, would like some additional support, they can refer to the Undiagnosed Disease Network International Diagnostic Working Group. And we'll ask for a whole heap of information in a standardized way, and then bring in a selection of those volunteer experts from around the world and share the knowledge with that local undiagnosed disease program representative. So together, many minds put together to have a look at the clinical features of that individual, what tests have been done, and if there are any gaps, any tests that we recommend, then we've got volunteers, organisations who are volunteering to do those initial tests for us. And hopefully that will mean that more families are able to get a diagnosis, and we can share that back with the local undiagnosed disease program, who will be continuing to support that local family on its next steps after a diagnosis. So really the idea of the Undiagnosed Disease Network International Diagnostic Working Group is a global sharing community. It says to raise a child, you need a village, and we feel that to solve undiagnosed families, that also takes a global village. So I'd be delighted if people had any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and happy Undiagnosed Disease Day internationally.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So our next two speakers are from Australia. The first one is Gareth Bynum, and Dr. Bynum is a clinical geneticist and the co-director of the Rare Disease Research Program in Australia, and directs their Undiagnosed Disease Program. So, Gareth, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Lovely to see you, and lovely to see all so many old friends, and meet many new ones. I look forward to meeting you all face to face soon. If the technician could please put up the first slide, that'd be lovely. Mr. Technician, I will become the technician. Are my slides visible? I'll take it as a yes. So it was really on the standing of the shoulders of giants that in 2015 we moved towards starting our Undiagnosed Disease program in Western Australia, really with a view to a vision to help further stimulate national efforts, because we really didn't have any research funding to speak of, and instead we chose to develop our program as a clinical service in the hope that it will also be sustainable. And unfortunately, that is the model that ultimately arose. It really worked through the blood, sweat, and tears, and really the goodwill of so many fabulous clinicians in our hospital, who all volunteered their time to do just as Emma said, to have a village that shared expertise across a range of different specialties to really try and get answers for children. And you've heard from Lily And you can see Lily here around the time that we first saw her through the program, and it really has been amazing to watch Lily's journey. And it brings us to now, where over the last few months, and really galvanised by John Christodoulou and others, a national network of undiagnosed disease programs. In this instance, a research network providing access to multiple types of omics testing and reanalysis, and again really shared expertise. And what I wanted to touch upon today in these few minutes is to partner with that undiagnosed disease program. We also needed to think about the rest of the life journey. We needed to think about coordinated and integrated care for children and families living with rare diseases. And again, I know a great thanks to Lily and her mother Dorota and all the other children and families and the clinicians and staff and administrators and the philanthropists and other supporters who really took a gamble and backed us now to implement our Rare Care Centre, which focuses both on children with rare and with undiagnosed diseases, because after all, every person with a rare disease at least starts out being undiagnosed, and currently probably about 50% of people with a rare disease are diagnosable. So it's an incredibly large segment of the rare disease universe that has very much its own special needs. And I think it's somewhat symbolic that you see Lily and Dorota standing on what is Klunka, which is the Noongar, the local Aboriginal word for kids, the Kids Bridge. And the Kids Bridge really connects the hospital, in this case, with a national park, with the outside world. And so it's really thinking about how are we connecting with for the whole of life? How are we thinking about the experience outside hospital and not just a health journey? And how do we provide a holistic model of care that caters for mental health, social health, economic health, peer-to-peer connection? And so that is what Rare Care is. It's about care coordination, integration for those that have a diagnosis or for those that are still awaiting one, the undiagnosed. It's underpinned by partnerships and people, by digital technologies, education and capacity building, advocacy and connection to expertise, research and trials. The functions of the centre are, most importantly, a cross-sector model of care. So really working very tightly with the insurance, the employment sectors, the disability sectors, and in fact employing people in those sectors, so that not only do we have pathways and can navigate to those pathways, but we have soft landings and open doors. The digital solutions, the workforce capacity, the stakeholder engagement, partnerships, which are oh so critical, health system advocacy, and of course robust evaluation of all that we do. And really very much it's an outward facing model, because life's better when you face out. So it's about facing out to the rest of life and embracing the whole life journey. It's about adding value and addressing gaps. It's also about providing a statewide service in Western Australia, which is the world's single largest, by geography, public health jurisdiction. It's big. It's 3 times the size of Texas. So not only have we established a metropolitan hub, we're establishing a hub in very remote Western Australia in a northern desert region, so that we can make sure that we're doing remote and Indigenous care to the best of our abilities.
Thank you, Gareth. We need to bring our next speaker on. Thank you. So Heather Reston is the Chief Executive Officer of Syndromes Without a Name in Australia. And I'm going to ask the technician if she's here in person or by pre-recorded video.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on Undiagnosed Day. My presentation is called There's More to a Diagnosis Than a Name, because I honestly believe there is. So what's the importance of groups such as Syndromes Without a Name, otherwise known as SWAN? SWAN provides information and support in a variety of ways to families who have children with undiagnosed and rare genetic conditions, because we want to limit the isolation felt by families. We want to increase awareness, and we want to advocate for systemic change to better support our families and bring our community together. The statistics are out there. We estimate 50 SWAN children are born every week without a diagnosis, and 30 to 50% of them will receive a diagnosis in their lifetime, but an awful lot won't. We know it takes a long time to get a diagnosis, 5 to 9 years, and many of our families will receive at least one misdiagnosis. Welcome to Limbo Land. Similar to the poem Welcome to Holland by Emily Pearl Kingsley, where she's on a plane to Italy and the plane lands in Holland and she realises her child has a disability. She has to plan for things differently. For SWAN families, the plane hasn't landed, and it's a land or plane full of anxiety, isolation, frustration, and a whole range of mixed emotions and feelings that SWAN families face. And it can be confronting at times. There are questions and concerns. What if it's a regressive condition and the clock is ticking away? Why haven't I got a diagnosis? Come on, it's 2022. And there can be a big impact when you don't have an answer. Should I have more children? Could I cope if I had another child with an undiagnosed genetic condition? What if there's a treatment or even a cure? And what supports can I access? We know they're harder to access when you don't have a name. So what can you expect when you get a diagnosis? How do you cope? It does take time to process, and often there's further worries and concerns and more questions. You might need to change your focus, change the treatment, change the type of therapies you do with your child. But it does allow for more targeted supports. And access is not fair and equitable. We know this in Australia and the rest of the world. Cost can be a barrier. Long waiting times are hard for a number of families. And how can you trust the final diagnosis if you've had misdiagnoses before? And how can you access supports? So why is a diagnosis important? It's important for medical implications, as it can lead to more effective treatment plans and targeted therapy. Parents become experts in their child's condition, and we can see increased collaboration, education and research amongst the rare disease community. It allows you to accept some of the behaviours and symptoms that come with the condition. It provides opportunity for peer support, and we know that's so valued in our community. It allows you to access services and supports with less bureaucracy, and we can see some of the mental health rates amongst our members decrease as their anxiety decreases with a diagnosis for their child. I always say knowledge is empowerment, and empowerment leads to informed decision making. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So the next discussion group is Undiagnosed in Asia, and our moderator is Derhane Wong Reiger, and she is the president and CEO of the Canadian Organization of Rare Disease. Thank you, Derhane.
Thank you so much. This is so very, very exciting to be part of this inaugural event. And it's very, very early here where I'm located in Canada. And in fact, even earlier because I had to move across 2 time zones. And actually the most exciting thing in doing that is visiting my little grandson. But I'm delighted to be here. I also serve as chair of Rare Diseases International, which is our global alliance of patient organizations. And of course, for us, the issues around diagnosis and getting to a diagnosis are one of the most important that we're working on collectively as a global community. I also, for the purposes of this session, also serve as president of the Asia Pacific Alliance of Rare Disease Organizations. And this is a group that has come together across Asia. Southeast Asia includes China, includes Japan, includes New Zealand, includes, of course, Australia, but also Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Singapore, and other countries in Vietnam, where we are also trying to work collectively to improve diagnosis in all the ways in which I think the Undiagnosed Disease Network is so instrumental. The one that's, certainly the saddest sometimes to think about is getting people to get a diagnosis for diseases which could be easily diagnosed, and of course those that in which there's an intervention that in many respects does not require much intervention. And that is with newborn screening, and that we're seeing increasing. Also access to genetic testing and being able to train geneticists, genetic counselors, increasing the profile footprint of that in the various clinics. And you're going to hear from some amazing people who are doing that right across the Asia Pacific area. And finally, of course, the newest kinds of diagnostic tools, including genomic sequencing, which are going to be the most beneficial in terms of being able to get people not only to a rapid diagnosis, but to a very accurate diagnosis, in many cases to therapies that exist, but also opening up the door for research so that we can, in fact, develop more and more highly, highly effective interventions for these conditions. We're all here and in the Asia Pacific region so very excited to have the opportunities to work collectively, but also be part of the global community represented by Undiagnosed Diseases International, and to be able to advance that. So thank you so very, very much for setting up the session and for opening up. I'm going to serve as the moderator, and I'm really delighted with the lineup that we've got here quite across the region, as I said. First up is going to be the Associate Professor Kenjiro Kosaki, who is at the Center for Medical Genetics. He is, in fact, at the Division of Medical Genetics, Department of Pediatrics at the Keio University of Medicine. And if you look at his profile, it actually covers pages and pages in the areas in which he's not only takes an interest, but is actually one of the leading experts. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Kosaki.
My name is Ken Kosaki, and I'm from Tokyo, Japan. I'd like to talk about some of our progress in our country. We have been working on the undiagnosed disease programs for the past 7 years, and more than 400 hospitals are participating. Patients are referred to 40 clinical centers, and the clinical information and the blood are sent to the analytics centers, including our institution, Keio University. When the genome data is obtained, it's interpreted in view of the clinical information, and when the diagnosis is made, the information is given back to the families at the regional hospitals. And the diagnosed rate has been more than 43%, and as you can see, more than 2,000 undiagnosed disease patients have been resolved through our program. Finally, I'd like to introduce a new program that covers neonates, babies. We have built up a new program which specializes in babies, and the program was developed 3 years ago, and we have analyzed 85 patients as shown on the slides. Patients are sent to patients' genome and clinical informations are sent to our universities through 17 NICUs in Japan. Whole genome analysis is performed after genetic counseling, and the diagnostic rate has been 48%. Among those patients who were resolved by genome analysis, about half of the patients were given clinically informative data, which had some impact on the clinical treatment. The diagnostic criteria for inclusion is shown on the slide. These are the areas of disorders which have been resolved extensively through our programs, including metabolic disorders, renal disorders, neurological disorders, gastrointestinal disorders, and cardiovascular disorders. As shown on the slide, at least 6 patients out of those 85 patients were given new treatment options, and the screening for complications have been instituted for 7 patients, and so forth. So the genome information was really clinically relevant. I'd like to show you 2 examples. This patient was initially diagnosed as possible metabolic disorders, and liver transplantation was planned. However, this patient was shown to have KRAS somatic mutations, and that mutation was arisen from leukemic cells. So treatment was changed from liver transplantation to anti-cancer drug treatment. This is another example who was diagnosed as possible infectious diseases, but this patient had a microvillus inclusion diseases, which was planned to be treated by small bowel transplantation. So this success was covered by media as shown on the slide, and a very positive response was generated from the public as shown on the slide. And now we are expanding this program to the whole country. So this is a summary of my message. Japan's National Undiagnosed Disease Project resolved more than 2,000 patients with diagnostic rate of 40%. New Undiagnosed Disease program for sick newborn babies has been launched in Japan. Hopefully we can learn from each other, and the problem of undiagnosed disease will be resolved eventually for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Kosaki. And as we will know, you are doing more than just for the 2,000 patients that have been in your program, but inspiring and providing resources for everyone. So thank you. I now turn to another really inspiring leader in the region, and Dr. Ratna Puri, who is here with us from New Delhi. Dr. Puri, of course, is no stranger to the Undiagnosed Disease Network. She is also a medical geneticist, the senior consultant for medical genetics at the Sir Ganga Ram Hospital in New Delhi, and we'll welcome her to give us some of her thoughts. Thank you very much, Dr. Puri.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. And I bring greetings from my country, my institute at Sir Gangaram Hospital, and the India Undiagnosed Diseases Network. So, you know, the story started about 7 years ago, where this family had 2 babies who were born 3 years apart. They had a very severe disease. They died by 6 months of age. They had intractable seizures, developmental delay, some skeletal abnormalities. But during the lifetime of both the children and much beyond, we were not able to give the family a diagnosis. So this is a rare disorder which really doesn't have a name. And it is this arduous journey of many years to understand the disease, the grief of the uncertainty, really, that requires a thought process, resources, and I think most importantly, a commitment to care. And within this collaborative program, the wonderful example that has been set by the Undiagnosed Diseases Network International, which you've all heard about, is actually a platform of like-minded doctors, scientists, researchers, parent, patient organizations, and so many people who really work together for these patients with rare disorders. So I come from a country which has a huge population, and if you extrapolate the burden, it's not small, as you can see, of patients with rare disorders. And we also have challenges as are present in any country. We have just a registry which is just starting. And for the huge burden of disease, our awareness for these disorders is limited. The resources are even fewer, as is the commitment of the scientific community for these patients who are one and far between. So within this whole concept, the program had to be set up, and it required a catapult, a force, champions, and really a support that needed to work together. And this was the Indian Undiagnosed Diseases program, which was just set a year and a half ago. It is like a cogwheel working together with the families, with the Indian Council of Medical Research, who has given us the funding for it, and of course, with all the collaborative efforts of the Undiagnosed Diseases Network International. And the picture I bring to you is of the April 2019 meeting in New Delhi, which really took this forward in a big way. So this aims to identify the accurate diagnosis in patients with rare diseases, to build collaborative capacity, as well as generate public resources for rare disorders. Now, this is a busy slide, but this is really what our program is all about. The effort is really to address the challenges and unmet needs we've heard about throughout till now of these patients with rare disorders. And these are patients who don't have an answer with all the current technologies that are available. So we have 3 centers, the Sanjay Gandhi Postgraduate Institute at Lucknow in India. In south of India, we have the Center of DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics and the Nizam's Institute, and at my center in Sir Gangaram Hospital, which is the collaborating centers. Now we have an open call for patient recruitment through a patient enrollment form and a contact email ID. We liaison with medical colleges and hospitals for recruitment of patients within the program. And it is this arduous process which involves deep phenotyping, putting in the clinical details, and going through the hordes of investigations that they have accumulated over the many years that they have visited multiple physicians and multiple centers in an effort to bring a diagnosis for their families or their children. And so within this program, we have created this little flyer, which is just a call out to everybody, because it's something that is very novel and new for my country. We have achieved a little in the year gone by. We have, made the program a little popular amongst the pediatricians. We've achieved some diagnoses, including the family that I started with, but we still have a long way to go, many challenges that we are all facing together. But the cogwheel works together, for all these patients that are still not diagnosed. And I think I will end with all the acknowledgements to the UDNI, the patients and their families, my funding agency, my hospital, and all the collaborating centers within the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Puri. That is absolutely inspiring. When you think about serving a country in which the undiagnosed population is probably 2 or 3 or 4 times bigger than all of our populations in each of our countries, it is daunting in terms of what you've been able to achieve. But the vision of it being a cog and engaging others and being able to amplify what you're doing and to see it in results, it's amazing. So now I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is Dr. Harsha Rajan Singh Baha, whom I actually know and have known for many years. He's a founder and CEO of the Jiva Informatics, but also importantly, the founder and chairman of the international humanitarian nonprofit Indo-US Organization for Rare Diseases. So thank you very much. I would like to turn it over to Harsha.
Hi, I am Harsha Rajasimha. I am the founder and chairman of the Indo-US Organization for Rare Diseases. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization focused on building collaborative bridges between the United States and the Indian subcontinent to help accelerate diagnosis and treatment options. For undiagnosed diseases in particular, the journey for a patient with Indo-US Rare begins by going to our website, and under the patients and families menu, they click on the patient contact form. That's when the connection begins. And once they go there, they complete their patient contact information. A key question in that patient contact form is whether they have received a diagnosis yet or yet to be diagnosed. Once they submit that form, the patient concierge staff then exchange information with the patient, make sure we collect all the necessary minimum information to be able to support the patient. And in that regard, they communicate with the patient and family members by email, texting, or SMS, and audio or video calling, all from within the patient concierge platform. So there is all 4 modes of communication supported there. And once they have all the information, they engage with the patient and family members, but also with our collaborators. Who do we refer the patients to, and connect them to experts, get information from credible sources and share with the patients, and make sure they are well supported and go in a loop until the patient gets a diagnosis. Now, so far in the last 12 months, we have received about 32 requests through the portal. Except one, all others are of Indian origin or from the Indian subcontinent. Supporting undiagnosed diseases, about 3 of them were undiagnosed, and a majority of them were diagnosed. And for undiagnosed patients, primarily we support them by connecting them to geneticists and specialists, or resources for genetic testing or sequencing, as well as to other support groups where possible. So here are case studies, anonymized. One middle-aged man, undiagnosed subtype of a muscular dystrophy suspected, located in India. All genetic testing or other types of tests that the patient had tried were inconclusive and it had remained that way for about 30 years. Unable to afford any private testing, and so we helped connect the patient to research programs, testing centers, and philanthropic trusts. And we are hopeful that we can get the patient a financial support so he can get the necessary genetic or sequencing test to get a more definitive diagnosis. The second case is a patient family actually located in the United States of Indian origin, all children with multiple varying and overlapping symptoms. No comprehensive genetic testing has been done, and test results did not actually explain all the symptoms, and only general diagnosis, and has remained undiagnosed for more than 10 years. So we have connected the patient to a consortium of rare disease researchers, and that provides a no-cost evaluation and subsidized genetic testing for this patient family. The pandemic has affected the family's ability to travel, and hence they are now seeking the telemedicine or video consultation with experts. The patient concierge aims to provide financial aid for diagnostic testing or access to experts through teleconsultation and referrals to research sites. The strengths being that a strong network of resources have been tapped into to help undiagnosed patients through the Indo-US Rare Research Concierge, and a technology-enabled scalable platform that allows seamless collection and dissemination of information. The expected impact is that we, of course, hope to, as part of the UDNI's mission, shorten the diagnostic odyssey and to less than a year from when the patient is brought to our attention. And that we can do only through collaboration and referring patients to existing experts and resources. I'm happy to answer any questions. It's a pleasure to be here today, and have a great rest of the Undiagnosed Disease Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we certainly know that over the years, Harsha's program has done so much amazing good for individual families who have been able to kind of get access to services that they would not have been able to otherwise. I think this has been an amazing profile of the kinds of activities that are taking place right across the region, and certainly the ways in which the professional services within institutions are actually also being able to build onto other kinds of individual initiatives. I'm also really thrilled the way in which families and patients are integral to each one of these projects. And I think, again, really speaks to the breadth of the undiagnosed disease community. And certainly, I think as Helene and Mika look across this, must take a great deal of pride to know that it has indeed started with individuals and families and continues to bring in everybody and certainly expand in terms of the worldwide footprint. I think we're going to move almost directly into our next session, but I don't know if we actually have the opportunity. I see so many people that are writing into the chat to acknowledge that they're listening. And I think for some of these people listening in very different time zones. So I think this has been a great opportunity, but I don't know if there is in fact any direct question that someone would like to put into the chat, or also be able to help us in terms of advancing what is going on across the region. I just want to say that on behalf of the Asia Pacific Alliance of Rare Disorders, we're also going to be doing a number of engagement sessions coming up that will include focus around genetics, genomics, genetic counseling, and also around what is one of the most important things that we hope, of course, is being able to get access to treatments for those patients. And it was certainly thrilling to see with Dr. Kosaki and also with Dr. Puri, the ability to not only diagnose, but in many, many cases, being able to diagnose, get to the right specialists, get to genetic counselors or to other counselors in which families can actually benefit from being able to do the right kind of planning, but also obviously stimulating further research and development in terms of access to treatments. So thank you again very much, and certainly amazing to hear the breadth across the region. I think we would look forward to, being able to follow up in many cases with the kinds of initiatives that we've seen here, the expansion of this, and the engagement of so many more people. So I think I now turn it over to Jennifer, who's going to introduce, I think, our next session.
Hello. Warm greetings from Ghana. My name is Samuel Ejenwiafe. I am a clinical psychologist and the founder and executive director for Rare Disease Ghana Initiative. Rare Disease Ghana Initiative is a national non-profit organization leading advocacy and coordinating care for persons living with undiagnosed and rare diseases in Ghana. Our mission is to improve the well-being and the quality of life of persons affected and their families. And we do this through awareness, advocacy, community, research, and support. Over the years, and through my work as an advocate for the undiagnosed diseases and the rare disease community, I have come to realize and know that diagnosis is not a luxury. Diagnosis is a necessity. Diagnosis means you can have access. You can have access to information. You can have access to treatment. You can have access to community support. You can have access, and you can participate in research and clinical trials. You can be counted and be included in national policies and plans. But unfortunately for some families, they do not benefit from these. They are only left with no other outcome than a worsened mental state. Because they are easily abandoned, neglected, and left alone, they spend a good amount of their time and their resources exploring and trying to find out what is wrong, and they have to wait and wait and wait for so long to know what is wrong with them. This is the plight of the family that I met that drew my interest into the advocacy for the undiagnosed and the rare disease community. Being affected by an unknown syndrome, they have all their 4 children affected. Understanding our healthcare system and knowing the challenges and the gaps that existed. That is, the fact that our healthcare system is predominantly focused on dealing with infectious diseases, with the neglect or little attention being paid to non-communicable diseases, and most importantly, ultra-rare diseases and diseases unknown are easily going to be secondary to our worries. Also, I realized the limited capacity to diagnose. That is, we did not have the labs and the human resources to offer genetic diagnosis to our patients who need it. Again, the lack of awareness and the low interest of our medical community to explore further and to go further with diseases that are not common and that are unknown. We also saw the many abuses that happen at the community level because people try to make all sorts kinds of assumptions and meaning into what might be contributing to the illness of the patient. And so to resolve these, we launched a diagnostic access program through the support of some of our laboratory partners around the world. We reached out to labs who were willing to help us resolve this problem. And through this diagnostic access program, we've enrolled over 100 families and been able to successfully diagnose over 70 of them. And out of these, many have come out to be a rare disease. We have, through this diagnosis, we have seen families being united together. Initially, they were fighting themselves because they didn't know what was causing the condition. But after diagnosis, now they know. They've come in so strongly and been support to each other. Aside that, we have seen that patients who typically wouldn't have had access to treatment, and we've successfully secured treatment for some patients because we found out the condition has treatment available. This is the value of diagnosis. And on this day of Undiagnosed Disease Day, I want us to draw attention to the many people around the world who are still searching for diagnosis. And together, if we all put our voices to it, we will be able to help resolve this dilemma for these families. We call on all researchers, we call on all health professionals and all policymakers, as well as the industry, to play their role. And together, we can do much, we can achieve more. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. And I know that you will do your best too. Thank you very much.
Jennifer, I'm Jed Leo's mom, and this is her story. So Jed has been diagnosed with WAC-related intellectual disability, or the Santo-Shinawi syndrome. He was diagnosed in February 2020 of this year. Jed was born a very healthy child at 3.09 kgs via elective cesarean section. When he was born, I noticed he had a very unusual cry for an infant. Well, he is my only child and my first, and I drew the attention of that to my OBGYN and his Jennifer, I'm Jed Leo's mom, and this is our story. So Jed has been diagnosed with WAC-related intellectual disability, or the Santo-Shinawi syndrome. He was diagnosed in February 20. Jennifer, I'm Jed Leo's mom, and this is our story. So Jed has been diagnosed with WAC-related intellectual disability, or the Santo-Shinawi syndrome. He was diagnosed in February 2020 of this year. Jed was born a very healthy child at 3.09 kgs via elective cesarean section. When he was born, I noticed he had a very unusual cry for an infant. Well, he is my only child and my first, and I drew the attention of that to my OBGYN and his pediatrician, and I was told that there was nothing wrong with him. As a matter of fact, his cry wasn't unusual and that it was normal cry and that every child is different. So aside that, he also had neonatal jaundice a few days after his birth. And even though his bilirubin wasn't high, he was put in the blue lights and also sunbathed. And we were told that there was no cause for worry. In fact, as a matter of a few days, he was well. With breastfeeding, I did exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months. And that with breastfeeding, I noticed that after every feed, he'll spit up food. And it was a constant thing. And I was very, very much concerned. So again, we saw his pediatrician and we were told that it was no cause for worry or concern, and that some kids spit up food, others don't, and that he'll be fine. But it still worried me. With his gross and fine motor skills, he sat independently at 7 months, and then at 8, also at 7 months, I noticed that he would blink. He would blink in a very odd way. I found it very odd. So we saw an ophthalmologist and he checked him up and said he was fine. There was nothing wrong with him. I also noticed that at 8 months, 9 months, he wasn't crawling. He wasn't even rolling at 8 months. And then at probably 9 to 10 months, he'll roll from point A to point B. We visited the clinic, saw the pediatrician, and they said what they usually say. There was nothing wrong with him. Some kids are late walkers and talkers and even late crawlers. So we shouldn't really worry, and that he will crawl when it's time for him to do so. But it was still very worrying to me as a mom. And we kept visiting and revisiting the clinic. And when he turned 1 year, we again visited the pediatrician and she examined him and realized that he had low muscle tone. We didn't know what that was, but she said to start physiotherapy. So we did physio when Jed turned about 14 to 15 months. We did physiotherapy, which lasted a bit. Yes. So when he turned 16 months, his feeding habits, he was a very good eater. He will eat all his meals, he will feed well. 16 months, everything went down the drain. He wouldn't eat. It was a struggle. He had constant constipation up till today. We saw the speech therapist, even though it was too early, as she said, to have an assessment on him. She also said that to see her when he turned 18 months, which we did. And then she did her assessment at 18 months, even though it was still too early. She said Jed was very much delayed in speech. So we started speech therapy. And then at 20 months, we went to see the pediatrician again because of his speech and hypotonia. And she referred us to see a pediatric neurologist. And when Jet turned 22 months was when we actually saw the pediatric neurologist. And she examined him and said he had hypotonia. So she gave a name to the low muscle tone, which we didn't know was hypotonia. And she said it wasn't a symptom of any disease or disorder. It happens rarely that once in a while a child will have hypotonia, which is not related to anything. And so she also made us run some tests on Jed. We did a thyroid and test, calcium and phosphate test, and everything was normal with him. And then she said to see her when Jed turned 2, because he was too young to be diagnosed with anything. So when Jed turned 2, we went back to her and she diagnosed him with autism spectrum disorder. But a week before he turned 2, he walked independently. So when he turned 2, Jed was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. She advised that we have intensive therapy. So we added occupational therapy to speech therapy, and a physiotherapist handed over to the OT. So that was in June of 2020. In 2021, I follow this young girl on Instagram and YouTube. And she had some similarities to Jed. Her symptoms were quite similar. She had hypotonia, speech delay, sensory disorders. She was diagnosed with having autism spectrum disorder. And then her mom had a genetic testing done on her, and it came out that she was diagnosed with Chang-Jingseng syndrome. So I thought Jed had it. I read an article related to that and shared it with Jed's physiotherapist, who also shared it with Samuel Wiafe of Rare Disease Initiative Ghana. And he advised us to have Jed tested via genetic testing. And some samples were taken from us in November 2021, and then was taken to a lab in the US. And the results were sent to us in February 2022. And it came out that Jed had a different diagnosis. It wasn't autism, it was DeSanto-Shinawi syndrome. And that is where we are now. At the moment, early intervention has really helped us. He's still not communicating verbally. He's doing a lot of nonverbal communication, and it has improved. He has therapies at school and also at home. Yes, we know that Jed has a superpower now. He is neurodivergent and he is uniquely wired. And this has been our journey so far. Thank you. Jen.
Thank you very much to both Samuel and to Jennifer. I had the privilege, of course, of meeting them in the past, but also at the Ghana Rare Disease Initiative, the African Summit. And as you can see, so many different regions coming into it. We can see that there's really, a long ways to go in some places where diagnosis is just coming in, not at all organized, and certainly, as Jennifer has indicated, really behooving upon patients and parents to do their individual work, to do the persistence, and to be able to get to a diagnosis. But with the collaboration that certainly this network and the kind of work that we're seeing across the globe, I think the picture is going to change rapidly. And hopefully, you know, in a few years, we're going to see from Africa the same as we're seeing from Japan, from India, and the ability to get so many more people diagnosed in much more systematic fashions, and certainly to the right specialists. And as Jennifer says, getting that diagnosis is actually so important, even if we don't have an intervention and a treatment yet. So thank you again very much. I think I would turn it now back over to the organizers, and really want to express again my huge admiration for the work that is being done globally. And really, this is a testament to the fact that we are indeed one global community.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doreen. It has been a pleasure, really, to listen to you and also the other colleagues. So now we start the session. We go back to Europe. This is a global meeting, which is really great. And it's my pleasure to introduce first Gülsin Gumus. Gülsin is from Eurordis, based in Spain. She is based in Spain, and she will present the Eurordis involvement in newborn screening. Please, Gülsin.
Thank you very much, Domenica. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this wonderful event. Today, I want to talk about how Eurordis, as an umbrella patient organization for rare diseases, advocates for faster and more accurate diagnosis through newborn screening. So to begin with, I want to give you a bit of a background and tell you why we advocate for Eurordis and for newborn screening at Eurordis. So apart from the screen diseases in newborn screening panels being rare diseases, newborn screening is important to us because it enables early diagnosis of screen diseases, right? So early diagnosis is the key for early intervention, and this is why we can make a huge difference in the patient's life. So also there are significant differences between the policies and programs for newborn screening across Europe, not only on the number of diseases being screened for, but also on when the test is performed, how the test results are fed back to the patient, how the professionals are trained. So what is the inclusion criteria of a disease? It's all different across the countries. But the most important reason why we advocate for newborn screening is that we don't want the newborns to have fewer chances of being diagnosed depending on the country that they're born. So this is why we set up the Eurordis Newborn Screening Working Group to develop principles for harmonious adoption of newborn screening programs across Europe. And it's a multi-stakeholder working group. So the members include clinicians, academics, genetic counselors, policymakers, and of course, patient representatives. So we developed these principles and also had a broad consultation process to make sure that we consider views of different stakeholders within the newborn screening system. And we published our position paper in January 2021, which includes 11 key principles to newborn screening and a call to action on how these principles could be implemented. So this is the position paper. It is available in 12 languages at our website, and the principles focus on aspects of newborn screening within all aspects. So highlighting that newborn screening should be considered as a system, not only the test. And we have to think about all these components that surround the test, like sampling process, inclusion, exclusion criteria for the conditions that are covered in the program, the governance, standards about data protection, and we also talk about information and education of all stakeholders is needed, also giving psychological, social, and economic support for the newborn and the family. We also advocate for newborn screening programs to screen for actionable diseases as well as treatable diseases. So it means that even if there's no treatment for a certain disease, there's still a lot that we can do as by testing newborn screening, like saving the family from the diagnostic odyssey or allowing families to plan better for their child's care and therapy and making informed decisions about future pregnancies. And also, if you look from a broader perspective, also by diagnosing individuals, newborn screening can support research and help discovering treatments for diseases that don't have a treatment yet. And we also have a call to action where we identified different decision-making bodies to call to action, both from European and national level. And we also called for a creation of an expert forum to provide trusted information and expert opinion to support this decision-making at a national level. And we also have a implementation plan that we have been taking action, we explored interest of member states to bring newborn screening as a topic in their agenda to promote the call to action. We helped organizing a high-level event on newborn screening during the Slovenian presidency in October. And now we are exploring options with the Czech Republic as well. We've also been working on promoting the Italian model as a best practice at the EU level. And on the other hand, we're also partners in a research project called Screen for Care, which aims to shorten the path to rare disease diagnosis by using genetic newborn screening and also digital technologies. And we contribute there with our expertise on newborn screening and the patient's perspective. And lastly, I just want to say that we received a lot of feedback and support from different stakeholder groups from many countries in many languages. And what we learned in this process is that we need collaboration of all stakeholders in order to have harmonized newborn screening criteria that can be implemented in different member states. So like parents, patient organizations, policymakers, clinicians and academicians, and treatment developers as well. So we need a dialogue between all these stakeholders to move forward from the current situation of newborn screening. And most importantly, what we have learned is that the impact of early diagnosis can be really life-changing for patients. And we should really highlight this when we are advocating for newborn screening. So we really invite you to check out our principles and support our actions to help us spread the word and help us raise this awareness further. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Gulsin. We are working very hard. We know very well. This is a community, really. And thanks, because we need a newborn screening. We need to enlarge newborn screening, and we are working very hard. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Wendy Van Zel-Stam. She is a professor at the Department of Human Genetics, Rabon Center. She works in Netherlands. She will speak about awareness and actions in Netherlands. Please.
Dear all, it's my great pleasure to be able to participate in this unique worldwide webinar to draw attention to undiagnosed patients and celebrate Undiagnosed Day 2022. Unfortunately, I'm not able to join you live and my camera isn't working. I'm Wendy van Zelst. I'm a clinical geneticist at the Radboud University Medical Center in Nijmegen, the Netherlands. As you can see on this slide, we hosted the last pre-COVID UDNI conference in Nijmegen in 2020, where we exhibited the photos from the Undiagnosed initiative funded by the Wilhelm Foundation in collaboration with Rick Guidotti from Positive Exposure. Although a lot has happened in the Netherlands and Europe after the EU directive in 2009 to improve the quality of care for patients with rare diseases, still a lot of patients go through an exhaustive odyssey, as shown in this infographic, before receiving a correct diagnosis, if even diagnosed. In 2009, Eurordis presented the results of their 12,000 Voices project. In the Netherlands, these results were reanalyzed in 2018 after identification and designation of over 200 Dutch centers of expertise on rare diseases and start of the European reference networks. Still, the same results were found. Over half of the rare disease patients received a wrong diagnosis with treatment. On average, patients receive a wrong diagnosis even 3 times before correctly diagnosed. 3 to 5 different medical specialists were visited before the correct diagnosis was made, which took over 5 years on average. Due to these impressive numbers, attention and awareness was raised within our Ministry of Health, which resulted in improving the integration of the European reference networks in the Dutch healthcare system, adopting offer codes to improve registration of rare diseases, and discussion about expanding or improving our newborn screening program, but even more so resulted in a new strategy in DNA diagnostics. Not only by moving forward from gene panel analysis to whole exome sequencing or whole genome sequencing in the nearby future, but moving forward to genetic testing as a first-tier diagnostic test. For example, all neonates at the neonatal intensive care units who are suspected of having a genetic disorder receive a rapid whole exome sequencing. The Dutch Rare Diseases Consortium, RADICON, showed this to be cost-effective and is therefore now implemented in the Netherlands. At the Radboud University Medical Center, we now offer this rapid whole exome sequencing as a first-tier test for patients with a developmental delay as well, before they visit our outpatient clinic. Hopefully, we will soon be able to increase the indications for rapid whole exome sequencing as a first-tier test in suspected rare diseases patients. On the website Diagnose Onbekend, which means undiagnosed in Dutch, the Dutch Alliance for Rare Diseases Patient Organizations, the VSOP, shows the initiatives for these specific outpatient clinics. As said before, we exhibited the photos from the Undiagnosed Photo Project during the UDNI conference in 2020. 10 patients from the Netherlands were photographed and exhibited. Due to extensive research and collaboration within, for instance, the SolveRD project, we have now been able to make a diagnosis in 3 out of these 10 patients, which is great and shows that all the attention and awareness and efforts in collaboration, research and reanalyzing these patients pays off. We strive to solve the others as well, of course, for instance with help from the diagnostic working group of the UDNI, because we all know that a correct and timely diagnosis is necessary before the right care and cure can even start. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Wendy. It's a pleasure really to have you, although not in live, but recorded. So since we are a little bit late, I would like to go straight to, I would like to present, invite Anne Nordgren. She's from the Karolinska University Hospital and she coordinates the Karolinska UDP. And she will present the Sweden Undiagnosed. Please, I would like to invite to not take more than 5 minutes, please, Anne.
Start my video.
We cannot see your slides right now.
No, I see.
You are at the end. Yeah.
No. And show. Sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Very well, very well.
Very well. Okay, good. Because my slides are moving like you know, they are. It's something is wrong because they are going forward very quickly. So something happened now. We tested it with a technical guy before, but now I need some help.
The technician can help us. The technician. Please, we need some help from the technician team.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And try to restart the presentation.
Yeah. Restart. Okay. Wait.
You need to reshare it in Zoom.
I reshare and I start again.
Yes. Now enter full screen with the presentation. We can see your desktop.
I don't know what's happening now.
Can we go in the meantime to the next?
The next speaker, and I can come after.
Yeah, the next speaker.
Yes, I think
fine.
that's better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Then, if we can go on, I would like to invite then Kan Bostug, and Kan. It's my pleasure to anticipate that he will organize the next UDNI conference in Vienna in November, as Bill Gall anticipated. Kan works at the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute for Rare and Undiagnosed Diseases in Austria, and this will be the second conference hosted by you, Kan. It will be a pleasure. So you will present the Austria UDP, please. Not more than 5 minutes because we are very late.
Exactly. I'll be fast. Dominica, Bill, and everybody in the Undiagnosed Disease community, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much, Helena, also. It's my pleasure to talk briefly about Austria, and because of time constraints, I cannot be comprehensive. But what we have to say is that the topic of rare and undiagnosed diseases has been an important topic here for quite some time now. In 2014, we opened the Vienna Center for Rare and Undiagnosed Diseases with a lot of actually help and let's say senior mentorship from Bill Gall that we are still very thankful for. In Austria, there has been a national action plan for rare diseases that was actually published after that we had established our center. And in 2016, we additionally opened a dedicated research institute. So we're running in parallel a clinical enterprise and a research institute. The research institute is named the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute for Rare and Undiagnosed Diseases. So we keep parallel names of these two. In Europe, as probably has been discussed already, there is a concept of so-called European reference networks, or ERNs, which is a process that has been started with some delay in Austria. And we now are running until 2023. This is the last meeting where we had a formal assessment of our center. So of course we cannot be, let's say, as comprehensive as, for instance, the NIH program. So we have focus areas of especially research, but also of clinical care. And you see some here of the key persons heading different thematic programs in immunology, hematology, neurology, bioinformatics, and dermatology, and many others. And so what we're really doing is we're bringing together different institutions, the Medical University of Vienna, the St. Anna Children's Hospital and St. Anna Children's Cancer Research Institute, and also the SEM Research Center for Molecular Medicine to comprise this Austrian Rare and Undiagnosed Diseases program. We have a focus, as I said, on selected groups of rare diseases where there's specific interest and competence. We have organized specific diagnostic and therapeutic pathways and routes for these patients. We have a contact portal for patient inquiries. There's an email address called serod@medunivien.at. And we consider ourselves as a service center that tries to guide these patients through their journey on the different, let's say, rare disease entities and also rare disease thematic boards. And the boards are a very important structure at our center. You can see here in an exemplary fashion, there have been 5 boards that our center has kickstarted, let's say, immunodeficiency board, a broad pediatrics board, a skin root board, a liver disease board, and a neuro board. Now, another thing that we have a big focus in is to actually do research and understand molecular pathology of these rare diseases. And we have, I think, conceptualized nicely the interplay between clinical care and research, which is depicted here. In green is actually clinical care, and in blue is what we sometimes sort of put in the middle, which is research to identify genes and gene defects and sometimes new gene defects. But this should all be then going back to the clinics and translated into clinical care. I talked about the ERNs already briefly, so I will not go into too much detail here, just to say that the ERNs are an important topic altogether in Vienna. And on this note, I should also mention that there's other focal areas of rare disease care in Austria. In particular, there's a strong group working on skin diseases and epidermolysis bullosa, in particular in Salzburg. And also Innsbruck is quite a center, especially for liver diseases and gastrointestinal diseases. But as said, I'm not trying to be comprehensive here. Another infrastructure that I wanted to mention briefly for Europe is there's a so-called European Hospital Alliance consisting of several quite established university centers that all try to harmonize their infrastructures and learn from each other. And actually the rare diseases are a particularly important topic for this so-called UHA network, where the medical university and us in pediatrics are partners of this network. And this is actually something that's very efficient for exchange. Now, as mentioned, we have a particular focus on research on rare diseases also. I will be quick. I will just give you some examples on the diseases we study. We study in my research group, in particular, immune disorders and autoimmune, autoinflammatory disorders. And I give you some examples how international this is. The first pedigree is actually from Vienna. The other one is from Stockholm. And here we found a new disease entity, human DEF6 deficiency, as a new entity where there's defective CTLA4 homeostasis and defective immune homeostasis, and because of that, dramatic autoimmunity. And we actually treated these patients with a targeted drug called abatacept to actually bring the dramatic autoimmune condition into a long-term remission. This has been published in Nature Communications 3 years ago. This is another patient that was referred to us from Budapest, from our Hungarian friends, a 31-year-old adult patient who had multiple symptoms of inflammation and autoimmunity. And here we found a monoallelic mutation in a gene called SYK, SYK. And this was the basis for a larger collaboration with other centers in Oxford, in China, and in Toronto that also found patients with mutations in this gene. This was also a new disease that had never been known as a disease entity. And all these patients have dramatic inflammatory episodes, but also a tendency to develop lymphoma, especially diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And scientifically, but also clinically, what's interesting is these are gain of function mutations. So SYK is hyperactive, and there's a targeted treatment option out there that had initially been developed for lymphomas, but we could show in a mouse model that is also efficient for the gain of function status. This was published last year in Nature Genetics. This brings me already to the end, which is to invite all of you to the upcoming meeting, which Dominika mentioned already, the 11th International UDNI meeting, which is going to happen in Vienna. We're very happy and very much looking forward to host all of you. The date is the 7th and the 8th of November 2022. And you can see here what we think is important, a nice conference hall, the Schloss Schönbrunn and all the nice sites you have in Vienna. And of course, a nice evening with a wine in the vineyards. So with this, I'm at the end. I need to thank many, many people, not reading all the names. And thank you, Dominika and Helene, for letting me present at this conference here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kan. I'm sure that during the conference, the 11th conference, UDNI conference, we will learn more about this excellent science, and we will have a great time in Vienna.
We are very much looking forward to hosting you, indeed.
Yeah, as I said, it's the second time that you host the UDNI conference, which is great. So now Anna is ready, and I would like then to call Anna Nordgren. Please, Anna, can you go on with your presentation?
Yes, I think that we will be able to, if you stop the other one.
We should take out, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, please. Please, I invite you to take 5 minutes because we are very late, unfortunately, and
yes, okay.
We need it. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry for this, but it's my duty.
Yeah. It's okay. It was. I don't know what happened, but anyway, now I got some nice help, so I think it's going to work. So I'm also very happy to be able to come and tell you a little bit about what is going on in Sweden at Karolinska and also at the UDP Karolinska. And my name is Anna Nordgren, as you heard, and I'm a clinical geneticist working here and also coordinating this UDP Karolinska. But first, I want to tell you about a large national collaboration for genomic medicine that was founded in 2018 in Sweden. And it was founded in order to strengthen precision medicine. It's 14 partnering regions with university hospital care and also universities with the medical faculty and 7 different genomic medicine centers. And the goal of genomic medicine in Sweden is to implement large-scale sequencing techniques and genomics in healthcare to ensure that all patients in Sweden with a suspected rare genetic disease will have access to the best and most adequate genetic investigations. And here at Karolinska, we have something called the Genomic Medicine Center Karolinska. And it's one of those 7 that we have throughout Sweden. And in this center, we have several different expert teams that all are experts in their own diagnostic group. And they have all created singletons or trio gene panels that we use So it's every gene panel is sort of surrounded with really experts in the field, and it's a collaboration between clinical genomics facility at SciLife Lab and the regional healthcare at Karolinska University Hospital and the University Karolinska Institute. And this is the largest clinical whole genome sequencing effort in Sweden, where we analyze around 2,500 samples annually nowadays. And this is a report from this team that the first 3,219 whole genome sequencing patients that we performed, we found genetic diagnosis in 1,207 individuals in 718 different genes. And at Karolinska, we have the UDP Karolinska, which is for syndrome diagnostics. And there we focus more on, in this team, on congenital malformations, intellectual disabilities, also skeletal dysplasias, overgrowth syndromes, and childhood cancer predisposition. And we have a very large expert team of clinical geneticists, also molecular biologists and bioinformaticians, and phenotyping specialists from all different, many different clinical specialties. And in this team, we have identified more than 20 novel disease-causing genes. And UDP Karolinska is working, it's like one side is in clinic and the other one is in research. And we have many different skills in these teams, from functional studies to phenotyping experts. And we also work in very close collaboration with the Wilhelm Foundation. And our goal is, now we have created this in Stockholm, now we want to create the same structure in all the universities, cities in Sweden, and start this. We have already started, but it's called the UDN Sweden, where we will collaborate on national level and also on international level. I want to tell you some things about the ongoing studies. So right now we have started a study for 85 undiagnosed patients. We got in contact with them from the Wilhelm Foundation, and we have made a very thorough flow chart about how to investigate those patients from informed consents to deep phenotyping to whole genome sequencing, analysis of data. And then we move on to RNA sequencing and to methylomics. And so we are going to do this stepwise in those 85 patients. Another study that I wanted to tell you about is that we are...
Anna,
yes?
sorry, because we have, I'm so sorry, we have time constraints. Can you really summarize the results? Or thank you.
I will do this on this last slide. So we have also performed 632 trios, and we have compared the whole genome sequencing to the exome sequencing, and we have found that an additional 5% in the whole genome sequencing cases. So thank you very much. I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Anna. I'm sure that we will have more time in the future incoming conferences. This is, as we said, Awareness Day. So it's great that you presented the UDP program in Karolinska, and a lot of progress has made. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Milda Galcute, and she's from FEDER. We go back to Spain. She will present Spain undiagnosed patients. Milda, are you with us?
Hi everyone, my name is Milda Galcute. I work in the research area of FEDER, and it's a great pleasure for me to participate in this event, introducing some of the actions that we develop at FEDER. As you may already know, FEDER is the Spanish organization that represents the voice of people with rare diseases and also people without a diagnosis. So today I would like to speak about the main services or projects that we develop at FEDER and how these projects help or involve to some extent the undiagnosed community. So at FEDER we have three main lines of action, but today I would like to focus on the first two as they are more related to people without a diagnosis. So the first one focuses on our target community, where we provide information and counseling services, psychological, legal support to everyone who contacts us, regardless of whether or not they have a diagnosis. And the second line of action is the society in its broader sense, where we develop awareness-raising campaigns and different research projects. So let me start with our first line of action, in particular the helpline service. Our team is integrated by social workers, biologists, educators, psychologists, lawyers, who respond to different queries that we receive. Last year, we received over 9,000 queries from around 5,000 individuals, and 200 of those individuals did not have a diagnosis. What kind of queries we receive? Well, most people ask for information about the disease, about the social support available, about the referral association, and we also receive a lot of questions about the process of obtaining a diagnosis. So as you can see, the range of queries is very diverse. Our second line of action refers to the research projects that we either develop or promote by means of grants. At FEDER, we conduct different types of research and participate in projects in collaboration with other entities or universities. Most of these studies include participation of both diagnosed and undiagnosed people, but of course the representation of people with a diagnosis is much higher. In terms of social research, at FEDER we conducted several studies on social, economic, and healthcare needs of people with rare diseases. And these studies also included a small number of people without a diagnosis. So, for example, one of the main research we conducted was called En Serio, and in the second stage of the study, we focused exclusively on the perception of undiagnosed individuals, mainly the economic impact, the perceived discrimination, among other dimensions. Another study that we are working on right now, in collaboration with our Latin American alliance, ALIVER, is a similar study on social and healthcare needs of people with rare diseases and undiagnosed individuals, but in Latin America. And there were 21 Latin American countries that participated in the study. Another project that we are working on is called Determinants of Diagnostic Delay. This research analyzes the three realities that exist within the group of people with rare diseases. First of all, patients who have suffered a diagnostic delay, those who have been diagnosed within a year, and also the undiagnosed community. So this research is conducted through two questionnaires that identify two different stages, before and after receiving a diagnosis. And there is also another questionnaire tailored for people without a diagnosis. In terms of biomedical research, there is a project called Origen that we have at FEDER. So basically here we are focusing on some abandoned cases, people who could not get a diagnosis for years. And so we have invited several clinical groups from different hospitals to participate in the solving of these undiagnosed cases by analyzing the genetic variations. And finally, FEDER also promotes research by providing grants. For example, last year we offered 6 grants for a total number of for a total amount of 130,000 euros. So hopefully in these 5 minutes I managed to provide a picture of how FEDER tries to contribute to the undiagnosed community through its main lines of action. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Milda. So for your presentation and the FEDER activities, and we know very well that you are very active and collaborating with many other patients groups and institutions and also scientists. So now we go to the next session, which is South America. And it's my pleasure to introduce Claudia Gonzaga. Claudia works in the Mendelian Genomics and Precision Health Laboratory international laboratory for human genome research in Mexico, and she will speak about undiagnosed patients in Latin America. Please, Claudia. Please keep 5 minutes, no more. We are really late, and after that we have to stop, otherwise the program, the meeting.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I will give you a very quick overview of what we're doing as an initiative for undiagnosed and rare diseases in Mexico and in the broader Latin American region. So just as a background, very quickly, the Latin American and the Caribbean region encompasses 33 countries with an approximate population of 629 million people. And therefore, based on the prevalence of rare diseases, we estimate that there are at least 50 million people that live with a rare disease in this region. This is a very diverse region economically, politically, socially, and also genomically and genetically. So it's a very complicated region to harmonize all of these issues around rare disease legislation, infrastructure, or even a definition for what a rare disease is. Well, some countries have adopted a definition, some others still haven't, and not every country has legislation and support systems around rare disease diagnosis and management. In Mexico specifically, a rare disease is defined as one that affects no more than 5 people in 10,000, which is around the definition, the European definition of 1 in 2,000. And therefore, we estimate that there are about 10 million people that live with rare diseases in our country. Of those, 2 to 3 million are indigenous or underserved patients. And there is a lack of early diagnosis approaches for these patients and generally patients with suspected genetic disorders. As previously mentioned by another speaker, newborn screening is a public health measure that is very important for early diagnosis. And unfortunately in Mexico, this is very heterogeneous depending on the particular health provider that the person has. And we have a very complicated health system. So newborn screening is very uneven across the country. Also, there are only 20 rare diseases that are recognized by the Ministry of Health and only 1.5 geneticists per 1 million people in the country. Patients that have a suspected genetic disorder mostly have molecular testing that is limited to karyotype and sometimes panel testing, but access to more modern and comprehensive testing like genomic diagnostics is pretty much inaccessible for patients in Mexico. So given this situation, in 2020, we started this network of collaboration between clinicians, researchers, patient advocates to focus on providing access to diagnosis and increasing research for rare diseases in Mexico. We focus mostly on the application of genomic sequencing and molecular diagnosis techniques to facilitate an early diagnosis and the diagnostic odyssey in patients, for patients in Mexico, which the average is about 10 years for people here to get an accurate diagnosis, in many cases their whole life. So we launched in January of this year, the Mexican Undiagnosed and Rare Diseases program. We get patients for the program through referrals, and they are clinically evaluated by medical geneticists that are part of our collaborative network. And we are performing genomic sequencing in collaboration with the Human Genome Sequencing Center at Baylor College of Medicine and the Gregor Consortium in the US. However, all the analysis and the follow-up, it's done in Mexico. The data is in Mexico at the International Laboratory for Human Genome Research. So in this year, as I mentioned, we started the program. We had the first patients recruited into the study in January of 2022, and we have already initiated some genomic analysis in April. We also had the second International Rare Disease Day Symposium on February 28th. And in the context of Rare Disease Day, this year, we launched the Rare Disease Patient Registry in Mexico to obtain information about the number of patients that are living with rare diseases in the country. how many of them have a clinical diagnosis, a molecular diagnosis, what is the gap between those, and also understand their needs and their challenges of living with a rare disease in Mexico, the cost of living with rare diseases in Mexico, and also the overall prevalence of rare diseases in our country. This is our website, and through this website, patients can register in this study and answer a quick questionnaire to give us, again, this information about their disease and what are their challenges. And we are happy to do all of these efforts in the context of greater initiatives to support rare disease research and diagnosis of patients with undiagnosed diseases in Latin America, along with initiatives such as the Undiagnosed Diseases Network International, the ERCAL initiative, the Global Genomic Medicine Collaborative, to enable diagnosis, research, education, and training across the region. And with that, I'll be happy to take questions or continue with the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. I do hope that we will have other opportunities, of course, for going deeper in this interesting program. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Roberto Giuliani from Brazil. Roberto will speak about Brazil Undiagnosed, and he's from the House of Rares in Porto Alegre in Brazil. Please.
Thank you, Domenica. I will start my video now. Just a minute. Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. Congratulations for this initiative. I will be very short. I know we have time restrictions. Just to give an overview about what we are doing in Brazil. In fact, we are, as a member of the Undiagnosed Disease Network International, we have been planning activities, and they will take place around the Casa dos Raros, or House of Rares. Is an initiative we are taking in Brazil, and we will launch activities still in 2022. Well, as you know, Brazil is one of the big countries of the world in terms of extension, but also is the fifth in terms of extension, but also in population, we are the sixth. So there's a lot of people living in Brazil, and a lot of patients with undiagnosed diseases, and the delay in diagnosis is quite high. In the metabolic film from where I am, we have a quite precise surveys that says that we take around 5 years of delay between symptoms and diagnosis, and I think that in other fields maybe even more. So what we created to address this delay in diagnosis and the diagnosis of undiagnosed cases, we created a few years ago the Genetics for All Institute to promote, came in from the academic and university, and to improve the access of patients to diagnosis and treatment. And also in Brazil was created a very active group, Casa Hunter, that was created by families of patients, initially from mucopolysaccharidosis, but later now it's really a rare disease advocacy group. So these two groups merged, and now have created this Casa dos Raros, House of Rares. So I will explain in a minute. It's a Center for Comprehensive Care and Training in Rare Diseases. So this is started to build a center for this in Porto Alegre, where I live in the very south of Brazil, to provide multidisciplinary clinical care, a diagnostic laboratory, expanded neonatal screening, also research, and we'll have a rare disease registry countrywide, natural history studies, biobank also to promote research, training in rare disease for professionals, and information education to the public. And also have a Undiagnosed Disease program, as I told, affiliated to the international network. So this will be the first center in this country. It will be in Porto Alegre, where I live in the very south of Brazil. A second center is already started the planning for this in São Paulo, which is the biggest city in the country. And we will have 3 other centers in the Northeast, Center West, and North region. So we'll have at least 1 center in each Brazilian region. And so regarding this Undiagnosed Disease program, we are already in planning steps. We will have a preliminary phase that will be remote. We'll have the consent, we'll capture medical records, we'll do preliminary tests, we'll have a guided evaluation by local teams. And then after the patient has this preliminary evaluation, we'll have an on-site evaluation. So we'll have a true physical examination, we'll perform additional tests, imaging, and anything is needed. And then we'll have the remote or on-site, depending on the situation, conclusion, with providing a management plan, counseling, and especially training of the local healthcare team to take care of that patient now with diagnosis, and also guide the family. So this is the plan. We are doing this. This is the building now is to be opened this year, the first center. And this is the team that is behind us, a team that has scientists, healthcare professionals, also a huge support from the society with entrepreneurs and the advocacy groups. And we have agreements with the national, state, and city health authorities, which is very important. Already partnership with university, academic centers, laboratories, and hospitals. So we will start operations in the second half of this year, and the Undiagnosed program will be one of our priorities. So here is the contact information. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Roberto. I do hope that in the future you will host a UDNI conference in this beautiful place. So it will be great to see your place, your structure, and also to share with you all the activities that you are doing. So now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Eric Klee. He is from Mayo Clinic, USA. And he's, as I said this morning, is also chair of the UDNI membership committee. Please, Eric.
Thank you, Domenica, and it's a pleasure to be here. This has been a great session today, and we're going to continue with a few more short talks from the United States. I'm going to move right into them so that we can stay as close to on time as possible. And our first speaker is Lisa Scamenti. Lisa is a medical geneticist here at the Mayo Clinic, and she has the auspicious task of talking about undiagnosed in the United States. Lisa.
Okay, can you see me and hear me and see the slides?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so let me go backwards. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank Helene and Mick of the Wilhelm Foundation and the Undiagnosed Disease Network International for inviting me to be here today. This is really exciting. And I'm not going to go through every possible avenue within the United States for care. You heard from Bill Gall earlier talking about the Undiagnosed Disease program at the NIH and the Undiagnosed Disease Network and the future of that program. And then in the United States, most individuals with undiagnosed disease and rare disease are cared for at academic medical centers throughout the nation. And I'm going to use my time instead to reflect on some of the things we've heard, some of the things we've talked about, talk about the journey, and discuss some unmet needs that if any of you are here listening today and have the capability to help us reach higher goals for undiagnosed disease patients, I thank you for being able to join us in this mission. So who are the undiagnosed? These are people I take care of every day. So I'm a clinical geneticist, and these are people who have been referred to me, usually after a long diagnostic journey. They'll come to the Mayo Clinic in an effort to get an answer for the symptoms they've experienced, but don't really have an answer. And they've had, may have had standard medical care. They may have had genetic evaluations elsewhere, but still don't have a diagnosis. One of the things about individuals who come here and are undiagnosed is that it always starts with a suspicion, and it always starts with a worry that something's wrong, and that, or there may be a catastrophic event. I think Jed's mother explained her journey really beautifully about that she noticed things weren't right about her son, and sought care and asked for help, and it wasn't recognized right away. Other stories that you may hear as part of the undiagnosed and rare community are stories like the story of Chloe Barnes, the daughter of Erica Barnes, who leads a council now in the state of Minnesota that's legislatively mandated to understand the journey and understand how we improve care for people with rare and undiagnosed disease. So these stories always start out with a suspicion of someone worried about someone they love, that something's wrong, or maybe even a catastrophic event like an epileptic seizure. Individuals are typically in the United States cared for through a primary care provider, and it's getting that attention of that primary care provider to then make referrals to specialized centers like Mayo Clinic, like other academic medical centers that have advanced diagnostic capability. But we still have a lot of barriers to care, despite all the great things that we have here. We still have barriers based on provider knowledge and the ability to, if there's what we say, if you hear hoofbeats, that most likely it's a horse. Insurance continues to be a barrier to care, whether insurance to pay for services at a tertiary care center, particularly to see a geneticist, or to cover the cost of advanced diagnostics like sequencing. Geographic access tends to be a barrier to care. So individuals who live in major urban centers and are close to academic medical centers can have access without having to leave their community. Individuals, particularly in rural areas of the United States, have limitations to access. And there's not a unified approach. When I hear my colleagues from Europe speaking about their national medical systems and a unified approach to rare care and undiagnosed disease care, we don't have that here. So it feels a little more random when we talk to patients. For patients with rare disease, we learned today that there are about 300 million people with a rare disease, and about half these individuals are diagnosed. And so we, again, don't have a standard strategy for moving patients through the system and getting them to the care they need. One of the things we do know is once a patient arrives at a tertiary care center and begins a series of diagnostic tests, we have a diagnostic yield of about 30% on average, and additional research testing that we're able to do at our center as well as other centers generally increases that yield by about 10%. So for about 40% of the patients with undiagnosed disease, we're able to make a diagnosis. Now, another group of patients in the diagnostic odyssey and rare undiagnosed disease space are these individuals who have ultra rare conditions. And so these are individuals for whom we may identify a new diagnosis that maybe hasn't been described before or has only been identified once. And these are individuals who have genetic variants in genes of uncertain significance, or even variants in known genes where they have DNA sequence variants of uncertain significance. And there's a great need for research to identify the medical relevance of these genes of uncertain significance and variants of uncertain significance. There's a need to understand long-term history for these individuals with ultra-rare conditions. Yay, we've made a diagnosis, but how do we can't always tell parents what's going to happen next. How do we provide prognostic information and then potentially identify best management practices? And then ultimately, we need research to identify therapies for these conditions. So some of the reflections for today is to think about the journey of the undiagnosed, how to improve access to care for all individuals with undiagnosed diseases, how to provide education and support for primary care providers so that they think about rare diagnoses. So when they hear hoofbeats, think about zebras and unicorns. How to remove barriers to care, particularly those barriers that third-party payers impose upon patients with rare and undiagnosed disease, how to support research to discover new rare disorders, and then research to discover new treatments for rare disorders. So thank you for reflecting on this with me today. Thank you to all the speakers who've inspired us today. And thank you to Helene and Mick and the Undiagnosed Disease Program International.
Thank you, Lisa. That was a fantastic presentation there and a nice synopsis of everything that had been discussed so far today. And actually a very nice lead into the talk that I'm going to give here next for the few minutes. I was asked to speak on the undiagnosed pipeline, which from the perspective that we're going to take here today is thinking about further analysis and what that role might mean once you have a patient that has been seen by a tertiary care center or even a primary care center, tested, and yet a diagnosis remains elusive for those patients. And so we've had the opportunity at the Mayo Clinic to explore a lot of this space amongst many other institutions worldwide doing similar things, putting together these translational research programs that really focus on taking ambiguous or lack of genetic diagnostic findings in these undiagnosed patients from clinical testing and doing additional analyses. And there's quite a bit that you could do in this space. Everything from more advanced analytical processes, increasing your algorithms, taking advantage of the large amount of data that's been generated worldwide now within the space of undiagnosed diseases, to the opposite end of that, which is taking it into a functional lab study where you're generating animal models, you're doing cell-based culture studies, those type of things. I'm going to focus on one aspect of this that is actually proving to be quite valuable, and that's this idea of reannotation or reviewing results. So once a patient has been tested with exome or genome sequencing, is it beneficial to go back and look at that? And I think what has been shown out in the literature right now is that yes, it is. It's worthwhile to go back and revisit the results of a non-diagnostic test, an exome or genome test, at some point in the future. The challenge with this is that it's somewhat costly or actually not feasible to do this systematically in a consistent basis, at least given our current infrastructure. But we do see that looking at this data, again, leads to diagnosis in the future that may be missed by a patient right now. And what is the primary driver behind that? It's really the fact that we're in just a very fantastic time period for genetics of disease, where we're going and discovering new causes and new variants associated with genetic diseases, especially rare genetic diseases, at a very consistent rate. And you can see here simply in the online Mendelian Inheritance of Man database, which catalogs most of the genes associated with monogenetic disease or disease in our rare and undiagnosed patients, that there was a consistent growth in the number of entries, the annotated disease gene associations that we saw. And I gave two snapshots, 2017 as exome sequencing really was hitting its full stride and becoming standard of care. We saw a consistent month after month increase in knowledge in this database. And again, last year we looked at the same thing, and that hasn't slowed. You can even look at the y-axis and see that, we're eclipsing 26,000 entries in OM. Now we're in 2017, we're only around 15,000. So we've seen this in a variety of different databases, and the idea of what we're starting to look at is how do we capture this change in knowledge in a systematic way to benefit the undiagnosed, such that if you had a test in 2018 or a test in 2015 or even a test in 2021, if we looked at your data now, can we find a diagnosis that would have been missed then because we weren't quite mature in our knowledge in the field, but we've gotten there. So one way we've thought about this is just creating a system here at Mayo, and I think this is something that can be replicated in many different places, but this is the idea of taking advantage of that data out there in these databases like ClinVar and like OMIM and like HGMD, the Human Gene Mutation Database. And we've been pulling that data internally and reformatting it and then taking snapshots of it and doing what I would call as a differential, a comparison of what was in the database 6 months ago and what is in the database now, and only looking at the new findings. We then vet this across all of the sequencing data for our undiagnosed disease patients. We put it through a filter to get it down to a very small subset of manageable findings. And our goal here is to say, we're not going to uncover every rock. We're not going to go to the depth of research analysis that we do for some patients. Here, we're simply going to look for those findings that would have been very obvious for that patient had they been tested today, but unfortunately the knowledge wasn't there when they were tested previously. And so we've now implemented this system at Mayo, and we're running it systematically on the patients that come through and are seen by our clinical geneticists such as Lisa, and it's been informative and helpful. We've actually had a number of diagnoses coming out of this system that previously were undiagnosed. And just going to end with one example of this, and this is just a timeline for one of our cases. And this was an 8-year-old girl, and she had some optic atrophy going on with a positive family history of optic atrophy and blindness. And so she was referred into Mayo in September of 2019, ordered exome sequencing, which came back in January. And that was negative. There was no reported results for this patient. She remained undiagnosed. 6 months later, a manuscript was published describing a gene AFG3L2 related to this optic atrophy condition. That actually resulted in the fact that that information made it into the databases about 3 months later, these published databases. In between that time, we had requested back the raw data from the sequencing lab and put it into our Renew system. And the next time we ran that analysis about right around May of 2021, this variant suddenly showed up, and it was a very obvious diagnosis for this patient, and we were able to communicate that back to Lisa, and Lisa was able to talk to the patient and let them know that we've now moved from an undiagnosed situation where they had been tested by exome sequencing and nothing found to a positive diagnosis for the patient's condition. And this is just one example of the type of things that can be done and the sort of systems that I think as a community worldwide, we need to continue to think about how do we build these out, how do we make them available to folks, how do we make them easy to use so that we can think about systematically reanalyzing patients' data when they're undiagnosed to capture the growing knowledge and growing expertise the world is generating in this space. All right, and so with that, I will move on. I hope I shared my slides with that. I just realized maybe I didn't. But we're going to move on to our next two speakers. The first is Gina from RUN, or the Rare Undiagnosed Organization. And I liked what she had quoted on her webpage, which said their mission is to create a bridge between doctors, hospitals, researchers, and families across the globe to help bring whole genome sequencing to patients who need it. And then we're going to follow that up with a presentation from Helen from the Call Research Initiatives, where they said they're a group of people all around the world working to improve the lives of persons living with overlooked diseases, in particular the rare, undiagnosed, and neglected diseases of the world. So you can see how these two are absolutely spot on for the conversations that we're having today. They're both been pre-recorded. That's why I've introduced them both ahead of time, but I think we can move to that now. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gina Zanuck, and I'm here today to share my story. I'm the mother of 3 children, Ava, Oscar, and Lucy, all whom are undiagnosed. I am also undiagnosed. We've been on a diagnostic journey for years and have not been able to find the root cause of our disease processes. I'll start with my journey. At age 34, I had a C-section with Ava, and I came out of the C-section on fire. The temperature in the room was set to 55, but I sure felt like it was 155 degrees in that room. But as a new mother, I wanted to focus all of my energy on Ava. And at age 3, Ava was diagnosed with an arachnoid cyst, which many people live their entire life without any complications. At age 5, she started to have mast cell-like rashes on her hands and legs, abdominal pain, fatigue, and pain overall, headaches. And we had a workup done in Chicago where we were living at the time. We started in dermatology and ended up in neurology. And I'll never forget the day that the neurologist sat me down, looked me in my eyes, and said, Gina, Ava is undiagnosed. We do not know the root cause, but we will help you treat her symptoms. After a long cry that night, I woke up the next morning and I said, I'm going to find another medical team that will help us find the root cause. We headed to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. There, Ava was diagnosed with an undiagnosed genetic dysfunction and undiagnosed autonomic neuropathy. Shortly after, Oscar was presenting and he was diagnosed as undiagnosed. Shortly after that, my baby Lucy started to present as well, and she is undiagnosed. Through that part of the journey, my disease process started to progress, and I had a workup at Mayo Clinic, and I was also undiagnosed. Soon after this, we were back in Chicago trying to just move on, and Ava ended up hitting her head. And sorry, I get emotional when I talk about it. Ava was crying like a wild animal. We would take her to the ER and they would send us home and say it was a post-concussion. She was given multiple medications to help with the pain. We kept taking her back and saying, no, there's something wrong. She's crying and she doesn't stop, or she doesn't look at us. So sure enough, we went to another hospital, and during that time in the ER, she started to have papilledema. And they wanted us to wait till Tuesday to have a neuro eval. And this was Thursday. If we would have waited, she definitely would have been blind and most likely passed away. She ended up having a subdural hygroma. She had 2 external drains, a cyst fenestration, and a shunt dependent. But during that time, we didn't know if she was going to live or die. It has stuck with me and how alone I felt during that time. But after she healed from that, we started back on our journey with the undiagnosed autonomic neuropathy, undiagnosed genetic dysfunction, where we walked into the world of genomics. And we were pushing for whole genome sequencing, exome sequencing. We wanted it covered through insurance. And we just were in this entire new world. And we were very blessed to be accepted to the UDN as one of the first patients of 4, family of 4, to be accepted. We went there in about 2016. And we enjoyed our time there, wonderful people helping and working with us. And unfortunately, we were still undiagnosed after that. I started to get involved with the UDNI, and my dream was coming true about international collaboration for the undiagnosed disease patient community. I also started the Rare and Undiagnosed Network, RUN, and wanted to have a community for myself as a mother, as a caregiver, as well as my children. I didn't want my children growing up in the world of the unknown alone. And we were very blessed to have a community, and they have mentors now to help them get through junior high, high school, marriage, life. And through RUN, we were able to have a network of patients, patient advocates, researchers, physicians, policymakers, all come together in this network and just help address the problems of the undiagnosed rare disease community. That I feel blessed on such a level on Undiagnosed Day to be here with all of you through the UDNI, the UDN, and the UDNF. Collaboration is key, and again, the dream of international collaboration, and here to celebrate Undiagnosed Day with all of you. If there's anything I could say to a patient out there or a caregiver of an undiagnosed patient, please keep fighting. Please don't give up. Every day, wake up. It's a marathon. And just understand that there's a community, a collaborative group here internationally to keep fighting for you. And we will work on the root causes, and we will work together. You are not alone, and just always remember to keep the fight. Thank you for letting me share my story.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to this amazing global audience, and my sincere thanks to Helene and Mick Cederoth at the Wilhelm Foundation for organizing this wonderful event. My name is Helen Hernandez, and I'm joining today from the Houston, Texas area in the United States. And today I'd like to talk to you about what we're calling the R69 initiative, which is basically the strategic promotion of this concept that there should be a diagnostic code that means undiagnosed. And ultimately, that this could be connected to tools and processes that can help expedite the diagnostic odyssey for the rare disease community. So this specific initiative and Cal Research Initiatives as a whole was born out of several years of listening to the rare disease community and hearing and reflecting on some of the common challenges, the diagnostic odyssey being one of them. At a recent International Rare Disease Showcase put on by Beacon for Rare Diseases, I had the distinct pleasure of hearing a mom named Boyana share her journey and about the truly amazing policy work she did in honor of her daughter Zoya. The law she wrote, advocated for, and ultimately saw pass in Serbia does many things, and it's this first point in particular that I would really like to see gain traction all over the world. And that is that if a patient goes 6 months without diagnosis in Serbia, doctors are legally required to send the relevant samples to an appropriate lab outside of the country that can help achieve diagnosis. So I thought about what some of the common challenges would be if this type of policy were adapted for other parts of the globe. And it seems to me that we would all need a start button. We would all need to be able to define the 6-month time period, or maybe it's 6 months in one country and a year and a half in others, but we need some kind of a start button. So what I'd like to propose is that we use our R69, which is the ICD-10 code for illness unspecified, symptoms, signs, and abnormal clinical and laboratory findings not elsewhere classified, which I think is a perfectly good definition for the meaning we are trying to convey. But this is a very early stage idea, and so I'd really appreciate being given the opportunity to share this with you so that audience members can get in touch with us and share perspectives and make sure that this idea can be refined. So I'm hoping to really get some feedback from the audience today. I'm showing you this really nice infographic that you likely have all seen before. The Solve RD Community Engagement Task Force led by Eurogist put this together, and I recognize several of the logos down at the bottom are actually here today and organized this. So thank you for this infographic, and I hope that it can help convey this concept that both the R69 code, along with other codes, for example, disease X versus disease Y, and some other codes that are already in use, can start to form patterns in the electronic health records that we can make use of. And I'm aware of tools that already exist and tools that are likely going to continue being improved on in the years to come. I think are going to make use of combing the electronic health records. And so what we're proposing here is really just a little bit of intention. It's really a little bit of, other patterns may exist, but let's be clear. Let's be intentional about our use of the R69 code so that it means, we are on the beginning of our diagnostic odyssey, and that will hopefully be a foundation for future tools that can go and look for these patterns to help find patients. Finally, this is a global initiative and we need more voices at our table. And with that, I'd really love to pass the mic to Lynn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn. I'm with CAL Research Initiatives and I'm in healthcare management here in Kenya. I'll be hosting and organizing the next R69 initiative roundtable. And I'd like to encourage everyone here today with any kind of perspective to reach out via our website or my email address in the chat box. I'd like you guys to share your perspective, even if your perspective is that this might not work because it's going to overburden the healthcare system because of X or Y or Z reasons. We want to know what these scenarios are so that we can either troubleshoot or prioritize the places on the globe whereby these scenarios aren't at play. So mark your calendars for May 20th. We're going to have different meetings for different time zones so that we can make sure everyone can make it and weigh in. Thank you so much, and I look forward to meeting those of you who take time to reach out. Thank you.
Excellent. Those were our two fantastic talks by Gina and Helen. And our last talk is going to be by Megan. Megan Haley is a senior research scholar at Stanford Center for Biomedical Ethics, and she's also a member of the Patient and Family Advisory Group for the Undiagnosed Disease Network. Megan.
All right, thanks so much. Thanks so much, everyone. And thank you for the invitation to speak with you all today and join the incredible group that has been put together for this event. As was said, my name is Megan Haley, and I wear many hats in the undiagnosed community. I'm an anthropologist by training and a senior research scholar in the Center for Biomedical Ethics. And my work focuses on the ethical challenges in research with patients with undiagnosed and rare diseases. But I came to this work because of this adorable little boy in the picture here, who's my son, Philip, who is enrolled in the Undiagnosed Diseases Network and remains undiagnosed himself. And as his mom, in that important role in my life, I serve as the co-chair of the UDN Patient and Families Group, known as PEER, and also helped to establish the new Undiagnosed Diseases Network Foundation. But enough about me. Let me see if I can forward my slides here. There we go. So who are we? As the viewers and the participants today know better than anyone, it's only really in the past 10 to 20 years or so that the undiagnosed have been broadly recognized as a community. And this lack of recognition, is due to the heterogeneity of the patient characteristics in our community, the lack of unifying framework to define it, as well as the skepticism many undiagnosed patients unfortunately face regarding the validity of their symptoms. However, the advances in genomic technology over the last 10 years have really increased the visibility of this patient population. Though not all undiagnosed diseases have a genetic cause, of course, these advances have been a significant driver of visibility for the community as a whole. And this is due to kind of twofold causes, both the way these tools provided in genomics can help patients find long-desired answers, and also the way in which these patients provide a rich source of scientific discovery regarding the role of genetics in human health and disease. So ideally, this is a win-win for science and patients. And these exciting opportunities have led thousands of undiagnosed patients around the world to enroll in research efforts like those pictured here and many others that were discussed today just in this event. And by multiple measures, these have been incredibly successful programs, providing diagnoses for up to 50% of undiagnosed enrolled patients, and also driving the discovery of hundreds of new disease-causing genes to advance genomic science. And these successes are so exciting and certainly deserve celebration. But these studies also raise some interesting ethical considerations that I would argue require further examination. So for example, how do we ensure that undiagnosed patients who are enrolled in research receive results appropriately, that expectations regarding timeline for return of results are communicated appropriately? While I'm familiar with many of the efforts of the panelists today, and know that the clinicians and researchers are certainly committed to having their research benefit patients, the actual logistics of that can be quite complicated. Also, for those who do not receive a diagnosis, how should they be treated when studies end? What happens to the data? What happens to those relationships? If the data are reanalyzed, how will they be recontacted? And I really loved what Dr. Cleese was talking about earlier about some of these efforts to do systematic reanalysis. But until those processes and systems are in place, we need to think about what our obligations are to patients and families who contribute to research and who have an unmet need for diagnosis. The challenge is that research is almost always funded for a set period of time, after which the scientists are expected in many cases to move on to other projects for which they have funding. At the same time, long-term follow-up with patients is costly. So we need to balance the considerations of following up patients long-term who may remain undiagnosed and are waiting for the science to catch up with the needs of the broader undiagnosed community, and ensuring that everyone has access to research resources if they want it. And then, of course, for those who do receive a diagnosis, how can we ensure that not only those patients with the socioeconomic resources to advocate for additional research are actually able to seek and obtain therapies for their rare disease? It's certainly an issue of equity that we think about a lot in the United States, and unfortunately don't do as well as we need to on. So given these many challenges, it's really critical for undiagnosed patients and families to be involved not only as research participants, but also in discussions of how these studies are designed and executed, and how patient data and relationships are managed if or when a study comes to an end. These are just a handful of the questions worth considering when we're thinking about research with undiagnosed patients. And I'm sure my time is up already, but if you're interested in these issues or in talking more, we are working on developing some guidelines for researchers and in working collaboratively with all of you to ensure that research maximizes benefits to patients and to the science. So please reach out to me if you have any questions or would like to talk more.
Thank you, Megan. That was a great talk. We really appreciate it. I want to thank all the speakers from today's session from the United States. And now would like to turn the conference over to Christina Casanova-Might for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Eric. And thank you everyone who's participated so far today. The talks have been wonderful. And thank you in particular to Helene and Mick for helping to put this together and really bringing attention to the plight of the undiagnosed community. So I'm here today. I have the honor of sharing some closing remarks, but I'm also here because the undiagnosed community desperately needs action. And most of all, I'm here today because my son is not. My son, Bertrand, was actually my introduction to the undiagnosed community. And after a 4-year long odyssey, he was diagnosed with a brand new rare disorder back in 2012. That diagnosis actually kicked off a second odyssey, a therapeutic one, but that diagnosis was powerful. That gave us community. It gave us family planning options to have more children, as you see here. It gave us the path to therapeutics and validation that I was not just some crazy mom, and much more. Then when I was diagnosed with my own rare disease, after a much shorter 2-year odyssey, the power of a diagnosis became much more evident. I took a break from advocacy to be with Buddy during his final days, but I'm here because when undiagnosed patients and families came and approached me to help save the Undiagnosed Diseases Network, I couldn't say no. I still remember what it's like to be undiagnosed. I remember the panic, the anguish, the anxiety, the desperation I felt during Bertrand's odyssey, and even to some extent my much shorter one. But what stands out to me is that, despite losing Buddy, we were in fact the lucky ones. We were lucky to get a diagnosis after only 4 years, when the odyssey is so much longer for so many. We lived in the United States, which meant we have water and electricity. Financially and academically, we had the ability to advocate and to travel, and I was able to quit my job to care for him full time. When you look and compare Bertrand to many patients across the United States, we were incredibly lucky, but when you look across the globe, that privilege is that much more stark. And this year, 2022 actually marks the 10-year anniversary of Bertrand's diagnosis. And in his case, the technology was there to diagnose him. And actually, by 2014, the technology existed to treat him. I know. But because people couldn't work together, he passed away in 2020. And efforts for that particular technology did not start until 2019. And the gene therapy for his condition should be out later this year. So collaboration, cooperation is so key. And imagine my shock when I realized that after 10 years, coming back into advocacy, not much has actually changed. I mean, don't get me wrong, science and technology has grown by leaps and bounds. It's been really phenomenal. But clinical action for patients and families actually hasn't kept up. So, as you've heard, Megan, Helene, Troy Evans, and myself helped to start the Undiagnosed Diseases Network Foundation because it's programs like the UDN, the Undiagnosed Diseases Network, that help make that critical collaboration piece possible. Because it's also not just important to get a diagnosis, you also want to get treatment someday. And the UDN or programs like it have the power to address systemic inequities that exist within healthcare. It has the power to make that critical collaboration piece possible. It has the power to empower patients and their families within their own communities. And most of all, it makes clinical action possible for patients and their families. And now, I believe, is the time for patients and families to come together because the technology exists, the science is there. What's missing is doable. If we can just collaborate and come together as an undiagnosed community, but even as a broader rare disease community that was once undiagnosed in many cases too, we can help build the bridges that will optimize the resources that exist and hopefully help as many of our brothers and sisters across the globe as we can, because a mother in the US loves their child just as much as a mother in Ghana. And that child in Ghana deserves a diagnosis and treatment just as much as my Bertrand did. So now this is the opportunity for patients and families to help build and guide a global patient-centric learning healthcare network. And hopefully more people from this wonderful webinar will be involved in this, and we invite everybody to take part and reach out and contact us, because there's so much that is currently the case in medicine that we don't do, but it's not we can't do it, it's that simply that we don't do it. So patients need to be asking those questions and building those bridges, as Gina has said, and so many others have also said on this call. Collaboration is critical to making action possible for the undiagnosed community, the rare disease community, and the subsequently newly diagnosed community, and to deliver to patients and families what they want and what they deserve. And we can solve these problems. I believe that the time is here and now. So I'm excited for what the next decade is bringing in terms of clinical action for our patients and families. And I'm grateful for everybody here today. So thank you. Let's see if I can stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you so much. And I'm so pleased that you could join us today. And I'm so pleased to know you and to be a part of the Undiagnosed Disease Network Foundation. And Mick and I are also so thankful to all of you and to all the moderators and to all of you who are talking and give talks today, and to all of you who have listened. And to see this community is growing, it's so amazing. It's so heartbreaking for me and Mick, since we lost our 3 children in an undiagnosed disease 20 years ago. 6, 10, and 16 years old. And nothing was there. And now we have a whole community. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And next year we will do it again. And we see you again. Please sign up at the website and at the newsletter. And we will recording this meeting and put it at the website. Thank you so much. We are so pleased that you join us.
Thank you.